saying that Andre really did a great job of laying out basically what we all have to deal with on the islands and what these birds have to deal with. The threats, they're all the same for all of us. We have a little bit different mix of the birds. And one thing that's notable between the Kauai Oahu and the Oahu that I've experienced on Lanai and here on Maui is that the attitude of the birds that Andre talked about, that they'll make hamburger out of your hands if you put them in there. That's not the case with our birds. Our Oahu are gentle and pleasant birds. So just some interesting differences in what each of the species are doing. So what we know that in Maui Nui, Molokai, we've got very few Oahu and A'o, and I'll go through later on some of how we discovered this and where we're going to go from there. Kahalala, we can't find any of the 3 listed species there anymore. They used to be on Ale, the offshore stack. We historically have records of them being there, but not anymore. And the island Kirk guys are planning for a rodent and feral cat eradication. They've got a lot of other projects on their plate, but they're working with island conservation and moving toward there. That the progress may be slow, but it is moving along. And the potential for restoring seabird habitat there is really great. So a real hopeful place for in the future to have restored seabird populations. On Maui, even with all the surveying that we have done to date, we have found no acoustic sign of akeake being here at all. We did have one taken last year at Oahe Wind, and we did find a carcass in an artificial burrow in the nest bowl of an A'o. It was quite desiccated, but we did manage to send it to Bishop Museum, and Ken Hayes did analysis on it, and it pretty much falls into about the same genetic line as the birds from Kauai that Carmen Antaki got from the genetic samples from Andre. A'o are returning now to the where it was a social attraction site at Makamaka'ole, the mitigation work for the Kahiawa wind facility. And last year we noticed a lot of aggressive interactions between A'o, and the sounds that were playing, just the aerial flight call of the A'o, we decided could be one of the problems with that. So we turned it off this year, and the birds have returned. We have 22 birds, active pairs in burrows at this point, artificial burrows. But we have Oahu in none of those boxes yet. This is year 7 of that project, but the birds are still calling adjacent to the site. So we have planned for this year to do searching outside of the enclosures in the areas where they're calling. Although we have learned pretty well that the area where the birds kettle up and call is not necessarily where the burrows are. The one good example of that is there's probably 400 or close to 400 burrows in the Alpine Wildlife Sanctuary, and there's very little calling that goes on there at all. Whereas half a kilometer away, there's a real intensive calling site. And there's no question that predator control and habitat management are what we need to do in order to restore these species. Well, we need to know on Molokai, are there any places left? We've done surveys, I'll show a map later on, and we'd like to do more, get more acoustic monitors out in areas like where Lindsay showed where the model that Fish and Wildlife provided showed that there was suitable habitat. There's still areas in there that we have not put any monitors, but it doesn't look good just from the monitoring we've done so far. Kahalala, obviously what we need to know is when's the island going to become predator free? On Maui, are there locations where they may be yet found? We have lots more area where we need to do acoustic monitoring, which is really basically the only way we can get in there. A lot of the area is Oluhe fern habitat, and even if we flew in there, well, because there's no road access, hiking access is extremely challenging, if not impossible. But then as you go around searching in the areas, you damage the vegetation, open it up for predator entrance, and we don't want to do that. Big question is, what is the population status of the 3 species? And flashing ahead, my crew guys and people from the park and people from Maui DOFAW will be participating in our first redoing of Cooper and Day's 2001 surveys around Maui. So we will replicate the 15 sites and hope to get to each of them twice. We'll see, once will be a minimum, but we hope to get to each of them twice. We started on the 1st of June with the first surveys, and we're scheduling them through the rest of the month. And we know that we're nesting in the Pukeave shrublands in the national park. I think Joy will probably address that later on. There's plenty of that kind of habitat on the northern slope of Haleakala that's in state lands and is in private lands, and finding the birds in there is an important step to make. And the same with the leeward Haleakala, beyond where we're working in Kahiki Nui, Nakula. The Oahu and A'u distribution has yet to be figured out. Akiaki, we have had no Akiaki recordings, and we don't have any idea what their habitat nest site selection criteria would be. I think likely, as Andre pointed out, high, dry crevices are good. We've had many years ago a dead Akiaki chick found near the shoreline, so it's entirely possible they are nesting at the shoreline and they could be up on the mountain, but we still need to get more acoustic monitors out to try and determine that. And a big question for us now is, how can we get our West Maui Oahu into the protection of the Makamakaole fences? Outside we have pigs, mongoose, cats. It's a constant problem. We've been very fortunate in not having barn owl predation in evidence anywhere in the area where we're working, but barn owls are definitely there as well. And then if we build coastal accessible predator-proof fences, can we use social attraction to bring birds into them, or will we need to do translocations? We've identified sites that are potentially good, would be good protected areas, but it's an open question as to what we will have to do to get them in there. And then lastly, I don't want to ever have a presentation going on, and I'm glad to hear that it's been brought up a couple of times, but when will we get an approved landscape level toxicant for cats? As has been said, building predator-proof fences is a stopgap measure, and without removing cats from the landscape, we are doomed to failure. So that's our radar unit. That's our most exciting thing for the next month. And then we'll do underline monitoring following that. And for both of these activities, we're following the protocols that have been well established on Kauai, and we're having training from Kauai folks that have participated in these. So we really look forward to what we will learn. So a lot of the work we're doing with acoustic monitors, we use Wildlife Acoustics SM2s, SM4s, and a few SM3s. The SM3 and 4 can be directly fitted into our helicopter deployment baskets, and the SM2 is first mounted on a piece of plywood. The The sensors are attached to the baskets with zip ties. We fly in a Hughes 500 with doors off, stage up to 5 of the units on the right skid, restraining them at the top with a webbing strap and a carabiner. So you take one at a time off. The helicopters are all left-hand drive, so the deploying person is located behind the pilot who can observe the deployment with his skid mirror. Predetermined deployment locations are loaded on a Nexus 7 tablet with Locus Pro software. Tracking is enabled during the flight as track lines assist in returning to retrieve the units. The right front seat person guides the pilot to the deployment location. When the deploying person and the pilot find an acceptable location, the deployer lowers the unit to the ground with the right seat person recording the unit number and the location using iForm on the tablet. And here you can see that's the, I don't remember whether it was up to 5, but that's where we have the units stacked up on the skid to take them out there. So we partnered with a number of organizations over the years, and these are the areas we've surveyed. Fish and Wildlife Service funded baseline surveys in Nakula, Kahiki Nui. Sun Edison, the then owner of Kahiava Industrial Wind Energy Facilities on Maui, funded searches in East Maui. American Bird Conservancy paid for helicopter time and acoustic data analysis on Molokai. National Fish and Wildlife Foundation through Island Conservation is doing the same for work on Kahalala. And Fish and Wildlife Service paid for data analysis on West Maui with Pu'ukakui Watershed Preserve Group and Pacific Rim Conservation paying for helicopter and staff time in West Maui. Here are A'o and Ua'u results from the East Maui acoustic monitor deployments. We've learned that the birds kettle up in locations to socialize while their burrows may be some distance from where the higher calling rates are found. Ground searching is the only way to definitively identify burrow locations. And ground searching in areas where ungulates and alien mammals are present and vegetation, especially uluhe fern, will be trampled, has to be limited unless the area is accessible for predator control and ungulate management. The areas identified here are too remote for consistent in situ management. We've deployed acoustic monitors on almost all the offshore islets of Maui Nui that could host seabird nesting. Pu'ukawai and Aleale off Kahalala are the only ones for which we have data analyzed to date, and none of our target species were found there. We did not get to a couple of the islets on East Maui, Mokumana off Pualu Point in particular, because by the time we were ready to put them in there, the 3 species of the red-footed booby, the brown booby, and the Brewster's brown booby are all breeding on Mokumana now. So, and they're there year round. So we aren't able to fly a helicopter in and drop a monitor in there. We've done Kalopapa. We had 3 units there, and Mokio, where we had 4 sensors, and none of our listed species were detected there. Wedge-tailed shearwaters, Wa'ukani, were found at Mokio. This was before the fence they have a temporary fence in around that area, a predator-proof fence under construction. Before that, cats killed any birds that tried to nest there. We have 5 years of automated acoustic monitoring data from the Alpine Wildlife Sanctuary up here on the summit. Only Ua'u have been detected there. Conservation metrics looked for Akeake and A'o, but none there. Pawalu Point over here, where we just talked about the coming in, the only nocturnal seabird we detected with 3 was Okani. Same was true Hawaiian Islands Land Trust owns that property and are interested in a predator-proof fence there, but we only found Uwa'ukani, and they again don't survive with the cats, the number of cats that were there. We did 4 sensors at Ahihikina'u, and that's an area close to where that Aki chick was found years ago, but we didn't detect any Aki calling now. So these are the areas where we are working, and others. Sierra will be talking about the Alpine Wildlife Sanctuary over here that used to be in some areas is referred to as DKIST because the Daniel K. Inouye telescope was in a habitat conservation plan while they were building the telescope there. That plan has now been completed, and the state and Sierra Ganter have taken over the management there. The DHHL land in pink here is a habitat conservation plan for Oahe wind, and they are monitoring the burrows there, providing predator control. They are using the same methodology as we use here. This is the Nakula Natural Area Reserve. This is the Kahikinui Forest Reserve. There is an ungulate fence around this entire area now. There is no fence dividing the natural area reserve from the forest reserve. And looking at the 3 different sites, the Alpine Wildlife Sanctuary having the largest number of burrows and on an increasing trend, also has a very interesting reproductive line here. It's hard to know exactly what's going on with the breeding success in that colony. The monitoring there has been done differently than we do at Nakula and Kahikinui and the DHHL land. So it'd be good if we can kind of coordinate those so we have consistent data from there. So the green is the Oahe DHHL land reproductive success, marginally trending upward. Burrows also trending marginally upward, as opposed to, you can see where the predator-proof or ungulate-proof fence went in. Ungulates were removed in Nakula Kahikinui, the blue lines, and we started out with 8 burrows here, and we're now up to about 83. So we're increasing more rapidly, and our reproductive success seems to be going up as rapidly. This one is a bit crowded with everything that's in there, but this is just the layout of where we are. The light brown areas are areas that we searched last year, and these ones at the top are all in the national park. We partnered with national park staff, and we have a scientific research permit for the park to search these areas up here, because while there's a fence that divides the state land from the federal land, the birds don't pay attention to the fence. And on that, this is referred to as the outslope Haleakala. And then right along here, it drops down into the erosional depression of Haleakala. And on the walls of the cliffs here, there are quite a lot of birds nesting. Our searches only go to the top of the breaks of that. I don't know how well you can read the burrows. You can see our burrows. This is last year's with 83 burrows. My staff guys have been up. They have found another 9 burrows this year so far without even doing dedicated searching. It's just in the process of doing predator control and the other other tasks that we carry out. The blue lines are kilometer-long transects that we have tracking tunnels on. We do 3 times a year track tunnel deployments for rodents, another deployment for mongoose, and then at the same time, these orange dots are for cat stations where we have cameras set up with an olfactory attractant and a visual attractant, and the cats cannot get to either of them, but they get attracted to them. And these black crosses are where we have run acoustic monitors on a 3-year schedule. So 2014, 2017, and 2020, we've done acoustic monitoring there to see you can hear the growth of the colony as well as being able to see it on the ground and the birds that we have. So here's the data. This is from the sensors from 2014 to 2017, and we haven't been able to fund the 2020 analysis yet, but we have the data sent off, and Oahe Wind guys are proposing to analyze for Akiaki there, following their take of one. They're especially interested in, well, where are Akiaki? What should they do in figuring out what they need to have to add to their habitat conservation plan for that species? So every sensor that we put out in 2014 had increased activity to in 2017, except for location 12. When we were doing satellite tag deployment in 2006 to 2008 in the Alpine Wildlife Sanctuary at Haleakala, we noted that while we were working there in an area with a concentration of burrows, we did not have calling petrels there. Birds congregated for aerial display and vocalization at the visitor center, about 1.2 kilometers from where we were working then, at the edge of a rim, where maybe wind and conditions for high-speed aerial acrobatics are more optimal. So this could explain why the highest calling out rate in our study is not in the area where we've located the majority of burrows. The 2017 searched areas included the area around sensor 5 and to the west, and no burrows were found there. So we look forward to the 2020 data to see what we have now. And here's Makamakaa Ole. This is referred to as Enclosure A, and it was originally designed to be the Newell Shearwater attraction site, and Newell Shearwater calls were played there. Area B was designed to be for Oahu, and the Oahu calls are still being played there. As I said earlier, we shut off the A'o calling, and the birds have still come back. So, as has been stated by anybody who's talked about fences, and a 30-year lifespan was spoken as being perhaps what they will last, this fence is 7 years old, and since we took over this project 2 years ago, or last year, not 1 year ago, we have spent an inordinate amount of time working on the fence. Along with all the rest of the work we do, the fence, the hood is blown off, the brackets that are on it are rusted and need a replacement. We have them and we're doing that, but it's a mammoth undertaking, and will require consistent funding in order to keep that fence functional. Some of the areas where it was located when it was put in there, oops, how do we do that? Over in this area here, this was put right on the edge of a pretty good drop off into this gulch. And so we have to do, before we can even repair the fence, we have to rebuild the earth along the side here, put in retainage, so that we can fill, so that it doesn't just erode away the fence. And both of these there's down off this side here, it drops right into Makamakaa Ole stream, and the wind comes up that stream. Even though we're at 1,800 feet, it's still, the wind is strong and it's full of salt, and it's just taking out the fence really quickly. We have a new fence material to try out. We're looking to order a roll of what's called aqua mesh that they build lobster pots out of. So it's in the ocean, underwater, salt water all the time, and then spends the off season sitting on the dock. So those traps last for quite a long time, and we're hoping to be able to use that. The fence material that they originally built this out of is no longer made, the mesh. It was not the full keep all small mice from being able to get in, but it's at 1 centimeter square welded wire fabric. So we work on treating that with a rust chemical, then priming it, then painting it to keep it as long as we can, but it's inevitable. And there's some areas already where we need to replace. So we will try out that new material and see if that will work. The reproductive success of Makamaka'ole has been 0. We have had eggs laid, but we are hoping that with the changes we made that this year we will have a'o, because these are the only known a'o burrows anywhere on Maui, that we changed out the substrate in the boxes. It used to be rock, gravel in the bottom, and then so we've made that all sand and left rock in the bottom for drainage below the sand. All of the artificial burrows in area B had been covered with an additional lid covering of 4 sides to keep the temperature down, but that had not been done in area A. And so we have now done that for all of these, and we're running temperature tests to see. We have a series of little sensors, data recorders, and we're moving them about, looking at the different boxes, because we know that the high temperatures can definitely impact the success of the breeding birds. And that is pretty much what I've got. Any questions?
Yeah, thanks, Jay. I have a question. The troubles you guys have been having with the fence are certainly concerning. I'm wondering, with hindsight being 2020, what could have been done differently from the onset to avoid these problems?
The fence problems?
Yeah,
well,
the rusty brackets and those, I don't know, the hood issue. I don't know. I'm just wondering what we can learn from this.
Right. So the lesson about the brackets, I think, was taken to heart, because 2 companies ago that own the wind facility, they realized that the steel painted brackets that they had were all rusting out, and they bought all new stainless steel ones. So using stainless steel is the #1 lesson to do. So we have those to replace those. The whole fence was designed by folks from New Zealand, and the hood design on this fence is excessive, to say the least. There is a 16-inch vertical piece that sits against the posts, and then it has a 90-degree bend, and it goes out a foot with a 2-inch bend on the end of that. And with the way the wind catches it, it just works the fence. I think you saw pictures of the hoods that are being used on Kauai, and we will look to making that modification. We need to have a less wind catching hood on that. The mesh material, again, that's something we think we might have a solution. We're going to go to that, but I would certainly say that the lesson there is not to use a welded wire galvanized fabric in an area where you have salt and wind, because it will just corrode out. And then just sighting of the fence, realizing that yes, you're going to be on some ridges, but making sure you have enough distance on each side of the fence to be able to access it. And it gets, if you're in an area where you're going to have rains, it needs to be vegetated right away after you do your installation, because then it's not going to just wash that dirt down the hill.
Yeah, thank you so much. So maybe some one of the other DOFA staff, maybe Cole or somebody, is anybody keeping track of these so that when, you know, at ESRC, when we get presented with mitigation plans, I just want to make sure that we incorporate these lessons learned as we're moving forward. Is there an official way that we're keeping track of this?
That's a really good point. That's actually exactly why we wanted to have this workshop. The YouTube video is out there if anybody wants to re-watch it, and we can try to have almost each presenter maybe summarize the key points of their talk so that we can condense that into a briefing for the ESRC.
Okay, thank you.
If there are no more questions for Jay, our next talk is about Haleakala National Park from Joy Tamayoshi.
Okay, I hopefully everyone can see the screen. I'm not sure if I had troubles earlier. Can people see it or not?
Yes,
Okay.
we can see it. Thanks.
Hello. So aloha, good afternoon. And my name is Joy. I work at Haleakala National Park in the Resources Management Division, and we've been managing Ua'u for 30 some odd years. Just to give you a quick overview, if people don't know the park, we have over 30,000 acres, and we go from Mauka to Makai, and we have a variety of intact habitats, luckily. And so the park has basically monitored birds for over 30 years. We have a large breeding population that's protected, and we've been monitoring and managing for them. But what we hear are usually present from early February, and the fledglings depart in November. We have about 3,000 known burrows, and we estimate the population is about 8,000 to 10,000. The burrows here can be pretty deep, so they're not very easy to actually see the burrows. So we actually use signs to help us determine if there's activity there and if basically chicks have fledged. This is kind of an idea of what the breeding chronology is for what we also have it for Nene on there, but they're here for a long time. But you know, we basically just protect their land habitat. We really don't know what's going on over the ocean, and other speakers have talked about that too. So we try to do our best to protect what we have here, and luckily the national park has been pretty good about doing management, landscape level management. Basically, the feral ungulate fences are really, really important, and we have a fence that goes around the summit area, and we have a crew that works on protecting, basically making sure that the fences are intact and doing different types of control as needed. But that really is the basis of a lot of our work. If we don't have the feral ungulate fences, any of the work that we would do to get rid of non-native plants or do any native plant restoration, or the predator control, our targeted predator control, for what would really just be for naught. So for the last 30 years, we've been doing landscape level habitat protection, the predator control in targeted areas that are really important for our population, and doing nest monitoring and surveys in different areas. We have an area on the West Rim where we pretty much monitor on a regular basis. It does vary because it's pretty labor intensive, and we have very small number of people on staff. We have a lot of interns that have helped us keep our programs going for all these years. We do some banding. It's more opportunistic these days, but in the initial period, we were doing quite a bit just to get an idea of what was going on in our colony. And public outreach has always been important for us because we basically have a lot of visitors that come to the park. So we have an opportunity to share with the public what we're trying to do up here and to have them appreciate what's up here. And the park is here because we have these unique natural resources as well as cultural resources. So for the park, the Ua'u population has grown. In the 1960s, we had a very low population, about 15 nests were there. There was predation definitely, and goats were collapsing the burrows that were present. In the 1970s, a teacher actually on his summer break to start doing surveys on a regular basis, and more nests were found, and rodent control actually began in the 70s. So in these pictures here, you can see along the West Rim, there were just a cluster of burrows in the 60s, a little bit more in the 70s, and in the And like I said, feral animal control was really, really important in helping us to protect the habitat that was really important for our wa'u. And so intensive research was started. Ted Simons did basically a breeding biology study and learned about all the different things possible about wa'u. That's guided a lot of our management. More nests were found, fence construction began, and predator control expanded to not just include rats, but also other non-native species. And in the 1990s is really when we started our program to be more consistent with our monitoring and our management and our predator control. The fence was completed, which surrounded the area. And in these, on this map here, it basically shows, let me just go back, that the fences are outlined in black here. So we have the whole summit area pretty much with some level of protection. These are just ungulate fences. Unfortunately, they're not predator control fences, but they basically have helped protect the habitat and keep it intact. And once the fences were in place, then the feral animal group could actually control the animals that were inside, the goats and the pigs that were inside. We started doing regular and systematic searches for wa'u, and noticed that there are definitely a lot more burrows and a lot more activity along that west rim. And on the other side, where there wasn't protection, we knew that there wasn't as much activity there, or if there were there, they weren't basically successful because there were still a lot of goats that were trampling the area. So we've managed to adapt our predator control. We used live traps in the beginning, but now there are other tools, like people were saying, you know, we've got these traps that are resetting and lethal traps that can still work for you out in the field when you're not able to basically monitor them in some of the remote areas. So the predator control definitely expanded in the 80s, became more consistent in the 90s, and we've had a lot of different tools in the last few years, and we're still working with it. We just basically went through a whole evaluation of our predator control, and in 2019 we kind of more formalize some of the different things that work for us and hopefully, you know, works for other people in similar situations. And we do multi-species control because you basically have to, you know, all of those, the rats, the cats, and the mongoose are all problems with or any ground nesting birds. And in the 2000s, we saw more colony expansion. We did more monitoring. We continued with all of our ungulate and predator control. In the last 15 years, it's been really, really great to know that we have all these neighbors that are doing control and research and monitoring on the mountain. So it's not just the park, but all of our neighboring lands. We have Maui Nui Seabird Recovery Project doing a bunch of different projects that are adjacent to the park, and on DECAS land, the state is working on protecting and monitoring and managing as well. So it's been really, really, really heartwarming to see that it's the mountain is being protected, the population, the Halakwa population, not the park population, but literally the the population that uses the mountain is really getting the protection and the attention that that it needs. So we've had more research. Obviously, the areas that are managed are greater now, and you know, we hope that it will continue. We have had some changes in our priorities at the park. A lot of the focus right now is on forest bird protection. So some of our monitoring efforts have kind of shifted that way. So and we monitor and manage for not only ua'u, but also for nene and for forest birds. So it's been a little bit of a challenge because we have a very small staff and everything, and we don't have a downtime. There's always some native bird that's breeding, and we need to do predator control the whole year to protect these species that we have at the park. So our burrow monitoring is very, very low tech. We have used song meters, we have put cameras, but we basically line the burrow with toothpicks, and we actually look for signs. And so we look for the activity signs that help us to kind of get a gauge of whether or not the burrow was successful. And some of the areas that we work on, I mean, I don't have a lot of pictures here, but it's on a slope and you're on, you're basically finding burrows under rock outcrops. But we also have them on the crater floor, and we also have them in the shrubland areas that are going up to the crater rim, and also on the different pu'u that are in the crater. So we have a lot of variety of substrates that the birds use here at the park. We try to survey different areas that are not just along the west rim where our legacy, I guess, burrows are, but we have areas like Nu'u on the backside of the mountain. We also have areas in the front country, like I said, that are lower down in the shrublands. So the birds are not just nesting on the rim. Now that we've had several years of protection with the ungulate fences and the predator control, the shrublands are available for the birds to use. So we've seen expansion of the areas that we're coming back to nest in. And we've been trying for the last few years to also implement a new monitoring protocol, because it is very labor intensive to monitor all of the burrows that we have. We have over 2,000, almost 3,000 burrows. So we were trying to monitor all of the burrows at one point, at least several times a year. And now we've been resorting to doing project burrows, a select number of them. And when we have different projects that might impact the ua'u nesting areas, we would monitor those areas a little bit more intensively as well. So, and we try to do some banding. Last year, during the COVID year, we did a few days of banding in one small section on the west rim, and we did capture some fledglings because it was during the fledging season, or just about that time when the birds are ready to head off. We didn't have any recaptures. It's been a while since we've actually banded birds in our different colonies, but in the early 90s, we started banding, and we would actually, we were trying to see and go to all the different areas that we had, but it's just a pretty labor intensive thing to do for our small staff. And hopefully we'll be able to utilize the help from partners in the next few years to kind of get back to doing that again, to have a better idea of what's going on with some of the birds that we've banded as fledglings. This is just a quick summary. And so last year was kind of an off year for us because of the pandemic. We were closed down for about 2 months, and that happened to coincide obviously with the ua'u nesting period. So we didn't monitor as consistently, I think, as we wanted to, but we found 66 new burrows, and they were up not at the rim, but they were a little bit lower down. And we checked at least 492 burrows at least once during the nesting season, and about 88% of them were actually visited by Nene, so they were active. We had 102 project burrows that were selected randomly, and we monitored those at least 4 times during the nesting season. And of those 102, 95% of those burrows were actually active, and 95 of those burrows were active. That's about 93%. Of those that were active, we saw signs that about 35 appeared to have fledged, and there were 2 that we noted were depredated. So we don't see as many depredations, but once again, this is just like a subset of the number of burrows that we actually have here at the park. This year, we're still doing our predator control. We're still trying to adjust and put more of those lethal traps out, because we can't monitor as much as we would like to in some of the areas because of remoteness, and we just have a small number of people on staff. We're doing nest monitoring in the West Rim area, but we're also trying to monitor closely the area where birds are nesting right along the road, since we have a road project that's impacting pretty much anywhere from the beginning of the park, as soon as you enter the park, all the way up to the summit areas. And in the past, we have had some of the burrows that were close to the road not be as successful as burrows that were in the crater or away from the road where all of this activity was going on. So we're monitoring closely as part of our mitigation. We're doing a bunch of different collaborations. As Jay mentioned, we helped fund the radar in part, and so we're helping with the radar surveys that were done by Alaska Biological Research about 20 years ago. And we're helping the state with surveying on neighboring lands that are basically birds that are part of the Haleakala population, but they just happen to be just over our boundary. So that's kind of keeping us busy. And in the past, we did do grounding pickups. Now Jay and his staff are pretty much taking care of a lot of that, which is great. We still try to spread the word about, saving our seabirds, and hopefully people are watching out for them. We do have a lot of visitation at the park because the park has reopened, not completely. We don't have, some of our services are not quite there yet, but the campgrounds are open. We have, the visitor centers aren't open, but we do have hiking available for people. And we have a bunch of changes with our sunrise reservation system went in place a few years ago, and that's pushed a lot of our visitation toward the evening. And it happens to coincide also when we have ua'u that are returning after dark to their burrows. And so we have noticed in some years, basically a few more roadkills than normal. Normally, on average, we have maybe one roadkill, but after we've seen the shift in the sunrise reservation system, so now more people are coming to visit the park and enjoying the park at sunset. And people just aren't aware that there might be wildlife on the road. So we're trying to do more outreach. It's constant. We have a lot of visitors, over 1 million visitors that come to the park. And we've had a lot more visitation basically now that some of the restrictions for COVID have been relaxed a bit. So it's always a challenge. We have new people coming to the park who want to see the park, and we're glad that they want to do that, but we also want to make sure that they understand that we have wildlife, endangered wildlife, that are here at the park at that time too. And as I mentioned before, some of the challenges we have this increased visitation, sunset traffic. We have some challenges with resource damage and roadkills. We are concerned about development on Maui. We have a lot of areas down on the lowlands that are developed. So the mountaintop luckily is still intact, and we have neighbors that are protecting that area. We don't know what happens to the birds when they're not here at the park. We can do our best to protect the habitat that they need for nesting, but really when they're on the open ocean, we really can't fully address that. So, and with climate change, some of the pressures of all of these things are definitely going to be even more of a challenge. And basically that's it. Just wanted to share some of the work that we've been doing over the past. It's long-term management, and we hope to keep being able to do it. And we're glad that we have a lot more partners now that are helping with protecting and managing on the adjacent lands. And that's it. Thank you. If there are any questions, I'm happy to address them.
Thanks, Joy. I have a question.
Sure.
About hiking to the crater about 10 years ago, and at the bottom of Keone Trail, there's that mahani tree, and I was taking a break under the tree, eating my spam musubi, and I got swarmed by a bunch of hornets who were basically attacking my spam musubi. Yeah. And then when I went through, and then they got it from me, I gave up. But when I was there 2 years ago, I was worried about the same thing, but I didn't see them around. So I heard that maybe you guys had controlled those wasps or hornets or whatever they were. So my question is, one, what were they? And two, are they under control? And three, have they ever attacked our seabirds?
Well, they're vexillions, so they're non-native, they're alien wasps, and they were brought in with pine trees from the Pacific Northwest. And we do control them. They are really a problem seasonally. In the spring, in April, that's when the queens are back out. And so we try to do some control so that we don't have large nests in the summertime, in the late summer and fall. That's when they seem to be the worst problem for us. And in some years, we have a lot of nests that we have to actually control and poison. Other years, we're able to do a decent job. It is a safety issue, obviously, like you mentioned when you were hiking. It's also a problem with our native species because they can swarm and they can attack. We don't have any documented where we actually saw a seabird get stung so many times that it caused them to die. But it's always, we have so many different alien species problems, and we're trying our best to address them. And we've been controlling as best as we can, and definitely, like the last year we weren't able to do much control, but this year we actually started doing some of the control, and we've actually been able to catch a number of queens before they were able to in some of the areas. So we
it's
definitely
working.
have to.
Yeah. So what was the name of that wasp again?
It's a Vespula.
Oh, Vespa. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Western yellow jacket.
Okay.
Right. Thank you so much for your presentation. It's good to see you again.
Great. Same here.
I was curious if I remember on the upper roads there aren't you don't have road lights. You don't have lights that go along the road. And
No.
so when people are hitting seabirds on the road, is it just the traffic lights that are attracting them down to the road? And then that makes them vulnerable to getting hit?
Well, I think there are a couple of different things going on, Melissa. So, you know, they land on the road. The road bisects their habitat. On either side, we have cinders, right? And we have areas where it's nesting. And so a bird might land very close to their burrow, which might be on the road. And because they're dark and people that are visiting are coming up and they are not familiar with the road, and they are not familiar with weather conditions, and just a combination of new people being up there that are unfamiliar, they don't know or can't identify the bird on the road, and the bird gets hit. It basically is some dark spot on the road that blends in with the road. And we don't have a lot of them, but as I said, we have so much traffic right now. Yesterday, as I was going up to leaving the park in the evening, there were 55 cars coming up for sunrise in a line, and it just wrapped around from the park entrance all the way down quite a ways. And then I kept on going. I counted almost 100 cars on Crater Road going up for sunrise. And that's just a crazy number of people. And there's no, you know, and they are going up for sunrise so they can see it. Sunset, I'm sorry. They're going up for sunset. They can see the road, but they're not familiar. They're rushing up to be there for sunset. They're going to be coming down when it's dark too. So you have this interface when birds are landing. It's the middle of their nesting season. They're incubating. So it's a really tricky situation. So, and we don't have a lot of coverage, and the park hasn't figured out a way yet to manage that increased sunset traffic. So we've shifted the sunrise traffic now to the middle part of the day and to sunset. So we definitely have to figure out something, because it will contribute to the number of negative interactions, I think, with all of that coming. It's going to come to a head. So yeah, I think that's the problem, that the birds are landing. It's the middle of the road. It's not a road to them. They're landing near their burrows. People don't see them, and it's dark. So, and we don't have lights, but we do have some lights at the visitor centers, but that's not where we're getting the road kills. We're getting them along the west rim where we have the bulk of the burrows, the core, and we're also getting them lower down where in the shrubland, where the birds are expanding and using those areas now where it's protected. So.
Okay, thank you.
So hi Joy, this is Fern. I had a question.
Hi, Fern.
You had one slide that showed the fledging rate, and it was something like 35%. That's actually a really pretty low number for fledging for a petrel.
Yeah, but you know, that's what it's been for it's still within the average for what has been going on for several years. I mean, I'm trying to think back when we actually, you know, it's compared to all the other, I guess, you know, results that people have shown, it is low, but it's consistent with what's been going on for the time period that we've been, you know, basically monitoring burrows. So the average for 2004 to 2019 for fledging was about 34%, 35%. And so what we had for last year actually is within that. So it isn't very high, but that's what.
So maybe maybe it's the way that you're figuring it. And I think Rachel just chimed in whether it's burrows you're considering active or whether they're actually monitored burrows to figure your success rates.
So it's not really, I guess when you think about it, it's assumed. We're looking at burrows and we're checking activity based on the signs that we see. And so the ones that are active that have signs of chick down or chick appear to be, so it's a parent fledging. It's not that we have a camera there and we can say for sure. We have cameras set at certain burrows because we have predator control in certain areas. So we have a predator control camera, a camera trap that helps us get some information about the burrow, but we don't have the capacity to have that many burrows with cameras at each one of them. And we have done, and you know too, we've done burrow checks with scopes and things like that, but
Right.
activity checks are basically that. We're monitoring the signs that we see. So it's a different kind of metric that we're using.
Okay, well, thank you.
Our cameras, and we had more technology that could help us, tell us for sure that it fledged or not.
Hi, Joe. Sorry, go ahead.
I had just a quick follow-up on that. As far as the toothpick method, can you just tell me a little more how that works? Because I think that factors into how you're doing those calculations. I didn't fully understand how that worked.
Yeah, and it was kind of based on, when Ted Simons was doing his work, we kind of followed through with some of the monitoring. So we set up toothpicks. It's a very low-tech method across the burrow entrance. And if there are 3 or more toothpicks that are knocked down, it's the size of an uwa'u, and along with associated signs. You see different signs as the nesting season progresses. At the start of the season, when the birds first come back, they're basically digging and they're cleaning, they're doing their housekeeping at the burrows. And if we're monitoring throughout the season, if it's an active burrow and not a prospecting burrow and not a young bird that's come back, you would be able to see the changes along the way. You definitely see droppings, you see tracks. If at the start of the season, you might see things that are cleaned out, like if it had an egg there that hatched, there might be shell and chick down if it fledged the season, prior. And then as you go on, you'll see adult down, you'll see chick down near the end. And if we're lucky enough, we have had cameras out when we were doing the satellite telemetry, and Jay and USGS was doing that. We actually had cameras where we could see that there was corroboration with what the signs that we see outside the burrow, along with what was actually happening with the burrow. So at the end of the season, we're looking and seeing if we have those chick signs for the active burrows we've been monitoring. And then we would score them if they were consistently active and it had signs at the end of the season. So we wait until it's November or December before we finally say it's the end of the season. Then we would be able to see which burrows had chick signs, and those are the ones that we would say are fledged. So it's not as if we were able to actually see the bird fledge or even be able to check inside with a camera. We're basically relying on the signs, and we've done that so that there is at least some relationship with, if we see chick signs, and that lets us know that that's a possibly, we can't say for sure, but it's a likely a chick had fledged. If we found an egg that was out or some depredation signs, then that would let us know that obviously it's failed, or if we find a carcass. So it's a little bit different. It's a very low tech method, and it's very labor intensive method, obviously, because someone has to physically be able to see the signs and look for the signs, and they're hard to see in some places. So it requires a lot of field work to do that, and some experience for some of our folks that are actually going out and looking at the signs too.
Hi, Joey. This is Rogelio. I had a question. Knowing that at your guys' site, you guys do have the invasive species, the Argentine ant. Have you guys had any negative sort of interaction with the ants into the Oahu burrows?
It's interesting that you should ask about that, because that is a concern. We have our trap lines in our Ua'u colony, obviously, to protect our Ua'u that are here during, this time period, and definitely during their incubation period and their hatching, and when the chicks are just sitting there and waiting for their parents to provision them. So we have areas in the Kalahaku area, it's on the west rim, the lower part of the west rim, where there are lots of Argentine ants in our traps, in the burrows, by the burrows. So we haven't, so it is a problem. We don't have any effective way of controlling for them. There is a researcher who's going to be coming in a month, and she's going to be revisiting some of the sites that Paul Krushelnicki, when he was doing some ant control research at the park, and we never, basically there isn't an effective pesticide that can be used. We tried doing aerial control, with pesticides, and we have something called Max Force that's used, but so we do spot, I guess, control, because it is an issue. We don't want the Argentine ants to spread to other areas, especially because we have the public in some of those areas where they are, but definitely within the Ua'u colony, we would like to be able to find some kind of way that would help reduce their spread, and be great if we could control or get rid of them, but we just don't have the tools yet. So with Nicole Heller's work coming up, she'll help us hopefully assess some of those areas and see maybe we can have some, it needs to be addressed. It hasn't been because there isn't anything effective right now. So it is a concern. We just don't have any evidence that it's actually harmed the birds necessarily, even though I know at other places, right, they have the yellow crazy ants, and it is a big issue. So we know it could be an issue, but they definitely are preying upon the native arthropods, and that is an issue. I don't know, if so. We need to do something to control them. Definitely.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Great questions. It's great. If not, I'll end this. Thanks. Thanks, everyone. Mahalo.
Enjoy.
Our next speaker is Sierra Ganter, who's also on Haleakala and is working at the former DKIST site at the new Alpine Wildlife Sanctuary.
Okay, can everyone hear me and see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So I'm Sierra Ganter. I work with DOFAW here on Maui, and I am Joy's neighbor up at the Alpine Wildlife Sanctuary. So the sanctuary is, like Joy said, we have a common boundary with Haleakala National Park, DHHL, Kamehameha Forest Reserve, Kula Forest Reserve, and Kuikinui Forest Reserve. It's located between 8,800 and 10,000 feet in elevation. It is a fenced-in area, which encloses about 328 acres. And that also includes other observatory facilities, communication towers for Coast Guard and FAA, and also a portion of the Skyline Trail also goes through the sanctuary, which is open to the public for hiking and mountain biking and stuff. This was the former HCP site for the DKIST project, and they did management from 2011 to 2018. And then prior to that, the national park also did some management of burrows in this area as well. So this is a map that shows burrows and traps. So there are a total of 372 Hawaiian petrel burrows that have been previously identified, either by the national park or DKIST. And we've also been discovering new burrows as well last year and this year. So back when DKIST was managing it, they were monitoring every single burrow that was identified, which was really good because it gave a really good picture of what was going on with the birds up there and the population. But this map just kind of shows the distribution of everything. So for methods, same like Joy mentioned, we use super high-tech toothpick method. We install toothpicks vertically along entrances, usually beginning February. And we use the knocking over of toothpicks as well as other signs that she mentioned to determine activity of each burrow. We are not doing the same method that we were doing with DKIS, where they were monitoring every single burrow. We're randomly selecting 100 burrows to monitor every year. So usually by August, September, we'll place cameras at the entrances of all the known active burrows, and we'll leave them out there and retrieve them towards the ending of November, December. And we'll use the photos that are captured to determine burrow activity and whether there was a chick that successfully fledged or not. For predator control. So DKIS in 2012, they managed it from 2011, but 2012 is when the predator grid was installed completely. They used a landscape grid system where traps were installed throughout the entire area within the fence, and alternating between live traps and A24s, which were about 120 meters apart. We were able to keep all live traps open because we had a talonic system, which allowed us to check every single live trap. We could check them every day if we wanted to, but we did it every other day. And so that allowed us to keep all the traps open constantly. However, when I started working with the state, beginning of last year, 2020, all the receivers and transmitters were inoperable. Batteries were dead and really expensive to replace. And in 2019, most of the traps had actually been removed. So there are a lot of traps in open areas, as you can see, that there were no burrows and probably no predators would be found in that area anyway. It's just cinder, there's no vegetation, there's just the open space. So I removed traps from those areas and kind of focused my attention on the clusters of burrows that we had within like all these rock outcroppings that you can see. And I created a kind of like a buffer extending about 20 to 30 meters out from each burrow. And then within those like buffered areas, kind of tried to do a grid system of trapping within that specific area. So it's more concentrated. And then even with that, I tried to maintain at least the minimum of 10 meters away from each burrow. So we're not attracting predators directly to the burrow entrances. And also the substrate. There's some areas that it's just solid rock and you can't put an A24 there. It doesn't make sense to put a live trap there. So kind of working around those obstacles. And so this was the original with DKIS, the landscape grid that kind of shows the traps with the burrows. They had 81 total traps, 40 live and 41 A24s, again, alternating with them being 120 meters apart. And this is what I got after implementing that whole buffer thing. So pretty much about the same number of traps, 79 total traps. It's just more concentrated. So the A24s are, most of them are 50 to 60. Some of them are 70 meters apart just because of where we were able to place them. And then going back to our data from DKIS, I made note of where there were past predation events or just signs of predators that had been documented, and use that information to figure out where to put the live traps. Some of the live traps that are located kind of along the fence line, those will have a live trap and an A24, just in case, with the intent that if there's something, a rat that got captured in an A24, that might attract a larger predator, a cat or something, to the trap. So for predator control, we use A24s and live traps. I do have camera traps on the live traps just to monitor activity around traps if, you know, an animal is getting attracted to it and just not going in, or if there's just nothing around that area. Prior to this, we were using bait that we had inherited from DKIS, which was like Violator 7, catnip oil, those like feline fix products. We didn't have any captures last year, so I switched that. And now we're using peanut butter for the A24s and a mixture of dry cat food and sardines with the live traps. And then also guards were installed onto all the live traps to prevent bycatch. So like I said, no predators were captured or removed in 2019 or 2020. 2019, most of the traps had been removed. So 2020 was kind of an in-between of that original landscape scale and what we have now, because traps had been removed. So we were installing traps. Some of the old traps were still there, and we were kind of moving things around. So not all the traps were installed and operating. But since we've switched the bait to the peanut butter, we've already documented captures on our A24s for this year, for 2021. So that's looking good or better. And then also, I'm not sure, DKIS is still conducting their long-term rodent control, which is part of their HCP. So they have a 50-year obligation for that. And they originally had a mixture of bait boxes and A24s, but I believe it's mostly A24s, and they have bait boxes that are just along the perimeters of the buildings and observatories. But I'm gonna go back. So on this map, all of the blue triangles that are kind of centered around the observatory area, those are all of the A24s that are maintained by DKIS as part of their 50-year rodent control obligation. So I put this up here just to kind of show, I wanted to focus on the new burrows that were identified each year. Our first year in 2011, we identified a lot of new burrows, and that we didn't have that many new burrows each year, but every year we were discovering new burrows. We did do systematic searches every year, as well as just coming upon a new burrow as you're doing your regular burrow monitoring or trap maintenance and stuff. What I found looking back at that data was a lot of those new burrows, the first couple seasons after we discovered them, failed, but they've been pretty successful at producing fledged chicks so far. But I would like to be able to go back to doing systematic searches, or even just increasing the number of burrows that are monitored per year or per season. And then this just kind of shows, I think Jay kind of had something similar, the reproductive success. Again, 2019 and 2020 were completely different monitoring methods, so just keep that in mind. But it's a pretty upward trend. There's a few fluctuations here and there, but for the most part, it's on an upward trend. And yeah, just keep in mind, right at the bottom there, right between 2018 and 2019 is when management switched over. So the bar graph on the left just shows kind of like the progression throughout the season. So out of 100 burrows that we had selected randomly, 74 of them are active. And as the season kind of went on, you see it drops down to 68 in July, 53 in September, and then we ended up with 32 successful fledged chicks. And that is, we know that for sure. We have pictures. We know the exact date and time that the chicks fledged. So, and then this is kind of just showing the timing of chicks fledging. So this is from data from DKIS. So it's usually the ending of October, which is where we see the peak, where we have like the most chicks fledging. Usually third or fourth week is when you see the peak. And so this is for 2020, which kind of follows that general trend of the fourth week being the most. I didn't include data from 2019. In 2019, I guess cameras that were put out too late, and we were only able to get chicks that fledged kind of in that like last week and a half or so of October. And so we had to use signs to determine whether the other burrows had a successful fledged chick or not. But we didn't have actual like hard data from cameras from 2019. Just on a handful of burrows, we were able to get that information. Future improvements, manpower, woman power, labor. Right now, it's literally just me. I don't have a technician. I'm hoping that will change within the next couple months. That would greatly improve a lot of things. But for the most part, I definitely am going to focus on improving predator control and trapping. I would like to upgrade to a system that they have on Lanai, the camera monitoring system. That would help out a lot with monitoring live traps, just because some areas it's just hard to get to and hard to get back if you're just trying to go and check 1 or 2 traps. And it's very time consuming. So that would help reduce the time required and effort required to check and maintain all the traps. And then we could also dedicate more time to monitoring more burrows, using more lethal traps, such as like the Doc 250s, body grips, looking into getting those implemented into the sanctuary as well. Changing the bait seems to have been working so far this year, and continue to monitor those traps just to make sure that the setup is as best as you can. Up there's not a lot of vegetation, and it's difficult to set a cat trap properly the way you would ideally want it set. So we're kind of just making good with what is available to us and doing the best that we can in that area. Also working on installing cameras at active burrows a little sooner than we normally would. I think by having the cameras out there, that would we'd be able to dedicate more time towards predator control, trapping, maintaining traps. And then you would just have to go back every once in a while, make sure that your batteries are still running, check your SD cards, camera placement, make sure it hasn't been knocked down or anything like that. But that's about it. Any questions?
So yeah, Sierra, this is Fern. I had a question. If you can walk me through how you're actually figuring what your fledging success is for a burrow? Because like Joy was reporting, it seems to be a really low number. I'm not sure how you're figuring a burrow is really active to begin with, and like, how are you actually figuring your fledging success for the area? Because that's some number that we're going to want to know for forever and ever for that sanctuary, to see if it goes up or down.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, the same as Joy, we put cameras out, so we're able to get a pretty good a good idea of whether there's a chick there or not when it actually fledges. There's sometimes where the way the substrate is around the burrow entrance, it's hard to detect signs such as footprints, or it might be rocky, you know, even when they do dig around and kick stuff out, you just don't really see it. So questionable burrows like that, we always try to put cameras there anyway, just so we know for sure. But I mean, the number being low, that kind of, even when I was with DKIS, our highest we had was 41%. And other than that, it always kind of fluctuated in like the 20 percentile. So, I mean, it's low, but that's kind of been the trend, like that's what it's been averaging since 2011, with some fluctuations here and there. But it's mostly the signs. We just use signs all the way up until about August, September. And then the ones that we know we are sure about, we'll definitely put cameras at. And the ones that we're not sure about, if it's far away, we'll just put a camera at it, just so we can know for sure and we don't have to keep going back to that same burrow.
Yeah, the reason I wonder is that I know for wedge-tailed shearwaters, there are two different peaks in mortality at typical colonies. It's early on when there's a lot of adult activity and there's predation that occurs to adult birds there. And then fledgling mortality sort of starts up when the birds get close to fledging and they're outside of burrows and they're flapping and doing things like that. And so I was really wondering, you know, what takes place up there, like with the mortality, and it's sort of like if you are putting cameras on burrows that have chicks, you know, it seems like that means only that, if you will, you're putting them on active things where you think the chick is there. So that would be 100% of where the monitoring is occurring, and still to only get 30-some%. Somehow that doesn't jive in my head with what occurs, and whether you wouldn't have a better idea of what the mortality is of that particular burrow or burrows.
Well, like last year, I'm not too I don't think in 2019 they had a couple abandoned eggs or egg rollouts, but last year, I mean, we didn't have any signs of predation at any of our burrows, even though the rate was pretty low. But then again, we are right now only selecting randomly 100 burrows to monitor out of almost 400. But even when we were monitoring almost 400 burrows regularly, you know, we had a team of 4 people were monitoring every single burrow at least twice a month. We were still having about the same results, not that much different. My thing would be right now, looking at the numbers, focusing on predator control, because the population is increasing. We're finding new, very active burrows every year. And those new burrows have produced chicks year after year. So, I mean, improving predator control as much as possible within my ability. But those are kind of the numbers that we've been seeing, even when monitoring every single burrow and having all these traps laid out throughout the entire landscape.
Are there any more questions? If not, we are going to move on to Hawaii Island, and Charlotte Perry's going to talk about the birds of the harbor.
Hey, Charlotte, are you able to share screen? This is Cole.
Wait, I'm trying to get in. Yeah. Can you see it?
No, we can't see it.
Hmm.
Do you use the green button at the bottom of the Zoom interface? I know last time you did it. Just curious.
Now, can you see it?
Yes, we can see it now. Thanks.
Okay.
You just need to go into a slide presentation
This
mode.
one down here, yeah. Are we good now? Is that good? Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's in presenter mode.
How come it keeps? Wait, here's my
I'm not sure why
display
it's doing that.
settings. Is there something in display settings I could use that swap presenter view and slideshow?
Yeah, maybe try that option. See. Oh, perfect. There we go.
So, aloha, my name is Charlotte Forbes Perry, and I'm the field lead for the Boreal Monitoring Program at Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. And I've been doing this job for 11 years and have been in the park about 30 years. And so monitoring of Oahu began at Havo in the early 1990s. And to this day, a total of 268 Oahu nests have been documented in our core areas, which we call Area 1, 2, and 3, and a Kahuku unit. In recent years, the 2018 to 2020, we've been monitoring between 101 and 111 nests annually in the core areas, with 55 to 79 of these nests being active in any of the given years. Our monitoring methods include monitoring of known nests using indirect signs such as whitewash, feathers, footprint, smell, and adult and chick down. We also we monitor a lot with wildlife cameras. And we've also been implementing the National Park Service inventory and monitoring Hawaiian petrel monitoring protocol, which is basically a systematic grid surveys in 2 of our areas. And we have 5 years of data from that already. And right now it's under review to how we're going to proceed with it. We've also done some FLIR monitoring with DOFA staff at our Kahuku sites and watching Oahu during displays. We do cat-proof fence checks and monitoring in our area too. And we also have this for the 2020 season. We used live traps on Mauna Loa Strip Road and A24s in our area to the fence protected area. Our reproductive results for 2022 is basically that we monitored 79 nests in all of our areas, active nests, and 37 of these fledged. Camera monitoring, we get better results with. We monitored 41 nests with cameras, 40 were active, and 23 of them fledged. And this, if I can get the video to work, is one of my favorite videos from this past year. Oops, sorry, oops. Let me get to the next slide. There. And this is the first year we've caught Oahu in flight on our cameras. And some of our 2020 predation and trapping results, we had 2 adult Oahu killed by cats, one at our Kahuku area and one at area 1, which both of these areas are not protected by the fence. And cats on cameras, we had 1 cat on 2 nests in area 1, and 1 cat was seen on 6 nests in area 3. But both of these are in area 3. We did not find any carcasses that were predated. And the A24s, we removed 18 rats and 18 mice from the fenced area. And so this is an update on our cat-proof fence. It was completed in 2016, I believe April of 2016. So it's now 5 years old. And we didn't detect any cats with our 24 cameras set throughout the exclosures. There was no cat sign within the exclosure. And so we believe that the area is cat-free at this time. And this is, for you guys who don't know, it protects 644 acres and it's about a 5-mile fence line. And monitoring inside the fence, we've had a slight increase in reproductive success. And as of 2021, we have 16 new nests that have been found within the fence area since it was completed. And another thing we got to set up last year was our vocalization playback unit that we purchased the unit from New Zealand, and Fish and Wildlife helped us get this unit and the supplies to make it. And we have a little video of it. And we set up a couple cameras near it too, and we caught some Oahu in flight checking out the unit. And in 2020, we also got our song meter monitoring from 2019 report back. And so basic results were we have both Oahu and Akeake at all of our Mauna Loa areas. And what was interesting was that we got burrow calls of Akeake at areas 1, 2, and 3. And so we're planning this year to do a little bit more searching near where the song meter was set. And also in 2020, this was our lowest elevation nest that we found. It was at 5,200 feet, and it was basically about 5 feet off the road up to our Kahuku unit area. Earlier in the season, an adult had been predated near it. So we later found the actual nest site. And so we set up a camera in March of this year, and we'll see what will happen at this nest site. And this is our only drive-to nest also. This was our field crew for this season, or 2020 season. I'm usually the only staff member with Fred, who's 25% on with us for predator control. And we were lucky to have a Kupu intern, Ashley Romero, and a tech for 4 months, Jessica Eden. And the rest of these people are volunteers and friends and family that came along to help out. And that's all I have to share. If there's any questions.
Aloha, Charlotte. I have a question. Could you clarify again your Van storm petrol data? They're guaranteed to be located on that site?
I'm sorry, I can barely hear you.
The Van storm petrol. Can you go back to that slide? We talked about that.
Are we talking about the song meter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are there known burrows, or you don't know where they are?
We have not located any burrows of Van Rump storm petrels.
Okay, but in your opinion, they are on site?
Yes.
Breeding
Yes.
colony.
Yes. My understanding with Van Rumps is they don't leave much sign outside their nest like Oahu do.
Mhm.
And that's why when the PTA work was done, that the dog was the thing that found them. So
what elevation are you folks at?
What's that?
What elevation are you
We are
at?
between 8,000 and 9,000 foot elevation.
Okay, I'm curious, in which direction is the Pakini Nui wind farm from your location, and how far is it?
That's the one on South Point. Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know how, I can't think of how the distance is. It's pretty far away.
Okay. Do you know, do you have any knowledge?
But we are hoping to get some mitigation funds through them.
Okay.
At least purchase some more cameras for monitoring and our fence.
Do you have any idea of the flight tracks of your breeding colony and which areas they fly? I'm guessing you don't.
We've only had 4 Oahu that were fitted with transmitters. And that was in 2013 and 2014. And for their shorter foraging romps, they would go out through, the south area of the island.
Towards South Point, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Nice presentation.
Thank you, Charlotte. That was great. The next Big Island talk we've got is Alex Wayne.
Hello, this is Alex Wong. Everyone see this all right?
Yep.
Okay. I work for the Natural Area Reserve System with DOFAW based out of Hilo, Hawaii. Today I'm going to talk to you about some of our efforts to monitor seabirds over the past 5 years. I think Andre and everyone else set this up pretty well. We got these 3 listed species: Wa'u, A'o, Ake, Ake. The 2 areas that I've been working on are the Pu'u'umi Natural Area Reserve on the mountain of Kahalala, and then the Mauna Loa Forest Reserve on Mauna Loa, outlined here in yellow and blue. So the Pu'u'umi Natural Area Reserve was established in 1987, but we didn't actually start fencing it until around 2011. We fenced our first unit and it was finished in 2015, our Lahomene unit. And while scouting and doing preliminary fence work out there, our fencing crew heard weird sounds at night, and one of them was able to put it together that they'd heard those sounds at Poliku in Haleakala, and we realized we had a Wa'u in Kohala. They actually brought over some staff from Kesserp and Carrie Derringer in 2011 and determined that there were mule shearwaters and Hawaiian petrels here in Kohala. So we were building a fence at the time, so they ran some reflective tape through the top of the fence, being concerned that there are endangered birds here. Maybe building a fence was going to have an effect. We've never seen a bird strike on our fence, thankfully. And so that area is now ungulate free, and we've built on that quite a bit. There's a couple more units under construction right now. Large area is becoming ungulate free, and we really want to find these colonies or where the seabird burrows are so we can better manage them and conduct predator control and maybe even a predator-proof fence. So Andre showed this earlier, but the graphs are pretty telling. Without predator control, the endangered bird populations drop and decline precipitously. And with predator control, we can bring them back. So we started, similar to a lot of these other folk, with song meters. Put out these song meters and had them analyzed by conservation metrics in a number of places, and worked with Pacific Rim Conservation in 2016 to put some of these out. And in 2016 and 2017, we basically used these remote acoustic devices and also FLIR, or forward-looking infrared thermal binoculars. So this is what we could see through the FLIRs in Kohala. So we usually see somewhere between 30 and 100 Wa'u flying around at night. So we know there's a substantial colony there, though the Big Island here is much, I think, much further behind than some of our counterparts on Maui and Hawaii. But I think we have a solid colony here. And so in 2018, we had not been able to observe any Wa'u landing at all, unfortunately. And we did a number of ground searches as well, just searching through this terrain, but you can see it's kind of thick terrain. Didn't turn up with anything. So in 2018, we first satellite tagged 2 Wa'u with the help of Andre Rain. Do this. So on the other islands like Lanai and Kauai, they know where their burrows are, and it's easy to reach in there, relatively easy to reach in there and tag a bird and then release it and wait for it to come back to get your data. we didn't know where our burrows were, so we had to actually misnet or try to misnet and attract adult birds that were just flying around. And we did that with sort of a rather large misnet and using light attraction. There's no, the nice thing about Ku'aumi Nar and Kohala is there's no artificial lights between Waipio Valley and Kapa'au, so it's a pretty large dark scape on the at night, which is great for our birds. And so our floodlight we put up here worked pretty well. Here's a show part of this video of Iwa'u coming in at night to our light attraction. Okay, so we were able to tag a couple birds in 2018. You can see on the left some of the short trips and tracks of some of the birds, and then on the right, one of the long trips of the Wa'u. But even though we did tag 2 birds and they did land, one of them did land, we're unable still to find any physical burrows. So in 2019, summer of 2019, we tried it again. There's Andre on the left, and we tagged 4 more birds, and this time it actually did lead to finding of a Wa'u burrow. There it is, and there's our first chick. It was halfway down a gulch in, as you can see, in a bunch of aluhe and other vegetation. So now we've set up a camp somewhat near this, and I should have said we started predator control earlier on, but we really ramped up our predator control in this area. We have a game camera on this burrow. It's a really remote site. We can only actually we only go out there 3 times a year, and it's all helicopter only access. So we're basically trapping when we go. Also in 2020, we expanded our song meter effort in a landscape like Charlotte was showing, completely different than Kohala, which is the dry lava flows of Mauna Loa. And we actually found 2 Wa'u burrows on windward Mauna Loa, which is different than in the park, which is on the leeward side. And similarly, also had ground calling of Akeake. So this is what it looks like over on Mauna Loa. It's completely different than our boggy, vegetated Kohala. And we got a chick also flapping its wings like Charlotte, but this one was kind of neat because it was in the snow. So that was pretty neat. So Mauna Loa Forest Reserve, as opposed to Pu'aumi, is not fenced. We are now doing some predator control there, but it's just largely open lava flow. And there's definitely cats up there, even in these super remote areas. So for this year, 2021, I'm really hopeful that we'll find an Akeake burrow. We went back to where one of our song meters was last year, where we had the ground calling, and we saw some splatters of small white guano that we think is the Akeake. And we are teaming up with PTA and Rogelio, who's talking next, to bring over the dog that they use to find their burrows. And so our plan is to use this dog that's known to have found Akeake burrows in nearby area to point out all the possible burrow locations, and we'll put a game camera on each of them, and hopefully by the end of the year we'll beat Andre to finding a ake burrow. And we are continuing with predator control and also working with Pacific Rim to hopefully get predator-proof fence. Probably the first one would be in Kahalala, is the area we've been working with over there. So in conclusion, we found now Wa'u in Kahalala and Windward Mauna Loa. It's a little different than the park. And we hope to find ake this year, and we hope to build predator-proof fences, and we are currently doing quite a bit of predator control as well. So that I'd like to thank all these people I've worked with here that are at this meeting, and those that aren't here. Any questions?
Alec, I got a question. Thanks, that was a great presentation. I'm a little bit confused. I'm not very familiar with Mauna Loa, so I'm a little bit confused on where Charlotte was working and where you're working. Could you help me to understand?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So our island is really big. Oops. So in blue here, this is the Mauna Loa Forest Reserve, and I guess I should have highlighted over. If you can see my cursor, this is like the national park, including Kilauea and down here to the coast, but they're mostly this southeast and windward or leeward flank, and their Kahuku unit kind of goes over here too. They have it's a pretty big area. Oops. So we are working over here on this windward side of Mauna Loa, and then on this side is where Pahalaloa training area is. So all three of these are actually really large areas to manage, and I do not know if our Wa'u on windward Mauna Loa are very similar, or just an extension of the colonies on leeward, or if they're different, or which ways they access these reserves. And you asked about that, and I'd already been wondering about this and thinking maybe we should tag some birds in Mauna Loa and see which way they come in. If they come from the Hilo side up the saddle, if they come in from the Kona side, or if they just go over Mauna Loa. Really anything at this point, we just don't know.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm sorry if I missed this. I'm just curious about the proportion of your individuals that are banded. In case there are downed birds, then we could identify which colonies they came from.
Yeah, we really don't have many banded at all. There's the 6 birds in Kahalala that we satellite tagged, we banded those. So that is it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that, Alex. Segues perfectly into the last talk that we have arranged for the workshop, which is Rogelio. So take it away.
Hello, can you guys see my slide and hear me well?
Yes.
All right, well, I'm the last one here, so I want to thank everyone for participating and sticking around. It's been amazing talks, hearing a lot of my colleagues I've worked with in the past, and hearing about their amazing work that they're doing. So my name is Rogelio Lorat. I'm the Wildlife Program Manager for the Natural Resource Program at the U.S. Army Garrison Pahalaloa Training Area. And today I'll be sharing with you guys the history of our first confirmed band rump-storm petrel colony in the Hawaiian Islands at PTA. So our BSTP management plan, and that is the band rump-storm petrel, our purpose is to gain insight and understanding of the extent of the band rump-storm petrel colony, as well as its breeding, phenology, behavioral characteristics, and identifying factors that impact their long-term survival at PTA while maximizing military training capacity. The picture that you see below, I believe really captivates exactly what our purpose is. What you guys are seeing here is a picture of a band rump-storm petrel fledgling coming out of a burrow, and it's exercising its wings. This was captured 2019 in November 7th at our burrow N05. So how do we achieve these goals? How do we achieve our objectives? Well, we implement three operations. We implement burrow surveys. We do this by using dog detectors. Once the dog identifies a potential burrow, we put in game cameras to identify and detect if there's petrel activity. And then lastly, we do a management predator plan in order to decrease predator pressures on the seabirds. So the colony, here's a map of the Big Island, and specifically in the center here is Pakaloa training area, which is a total of 132,000 acres in size. And I'll be focusing on the bottom south corner. We started monitoring for band rump-storm petrel in 2015. That is when we first were able to detect a band rump-storm petrel with our cameras. Well, we consider the colony site. It's located in the northern slopes of Mauna Loa. The elevation there is about 2,100 meters. And the terrain consists of a'a and pahoehoe flows. In the past 6 years, here on the map, the red stars indicate active burrows, and the white triangles represent inactive burrows. In total, for the past years, we've been able to find 5 burrows where our cameras have detected band rump-storm petrel activity. In addition to that, our dog detector has identified 18 points of interest, which we deem as potential burrows. Now, for these 18, none of our cameras detected any burrow activity. Therefore, they're just considered potential, not active burrows. Now, throughout the slide, I'll be showing you guys a very similar map. This map is a map that we made for last year's data collection. So last year, we revisited all 18 potential burrows with our dog, and we also revisited our 5 active burrows. And only 2 of those burrows showed band rump-storm petrel activity, and the remaining 3 were inactive. Now I want to show you guys this sort of different feature map, satellite image of our colony. And the main focus I want you to look at is there's this collapsed lava tube crevice that runs along at the bottom of what's considered the Pu'okole cinder cone or caldera. Now this break of lava flow, it runs about 1.5 kilometers. And one thing is, just looking at it through the satellite, it does appear that this could be a landmark that maybe the birds are identifying as they're flying, just because it appears that at least the previous 5 active burrows do follow that crevice. So what do we do to find these burrows? Well, knowing that these birds are very cryptic, and just like Alex mentioned, It appears from our data, these birds are very clean. We don't ever in the past 6 years found any guano or any scent to let us find them a lot easier. And in 2015, we decided to kind of think outside the box. We've been reading a lot about dog detectors being used for various biological uses for battling invasive ants, detecting other different T&E species. So we hired Teresa Gahate. She's a dog handler that lives in Oahu. So with her help and her trained dog Makalani, which is a Springer Spaniel, in 2015, we assisted her in training Makalani to pick up the scent of the Banram Storm Petrel. Now, we were very successful where Maka was able to identify that year numerous potential burrows, and we ended up in 2015 capturing one of these burrows with the Banram Storm Petrel inside there. So how do we track Makalani's trails? We attach a Astro T5 collar to Maka, and using a Garmin device, we document the route that he takes. Now, roughly each search that we do with Maka takes about 5 hours. Here on the map, you can see sort of the spaghetti lines, just showing you guys the routes that we've taken Maka. For this purpose, I'm only showing the last 3 years. So we've done searches in different months from June, August, September. In 2018, Maka transversed up to 13 kilometers. During these searches, he was able to identify and point 3 active burrows. And again, anytime I say active burrow, it's identified that we got a detection with our game cameras. In addition to those 3 active burrows, he also identified 3 new potential burrows. In 2019, we were able to increase our searches. Maka transversed up to 28 kilometers. In addition to that, again, he was able to point to 3 active burrows, and we found 3 additional potential burrows. Now, in 2019, due to COVID challenges, we were only able to conduct 1 search. And by that search, it was a 12-kilometer distance that we were able to travel. And Maka identified 2 active burrows. And he did pick up a scent in 1 previous potential burrow, but our game cameras did not pick up any BSTP activity. So what happens after Maka identifies a potential burrow? Well, we set up Reconyx XP9 cameras at each burrow that Maka shows interest. And the way that we set up our cameras are, first, we set it to trigger on motion sensor. So anytime it's triggered via motion, it takes 1 picture as well as a 30-second video. And in addition to that, we also set up a time-lapse setting where we take a picture, a single picture every 30 seconds. Our time intervals are from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. and then they turn back on 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. Now, we identified these sort of time pockets based on previous data that we collected through our song meter information, but as well as previous BSTP activity that we captured on the cameras. Now, we deploy these cameras in the beginning of May, and we collect them back in November. Our cycles, we visit every camera every 2 weeks. We collect the SD cards and replace all the batteries. Picture on the left-hand side is one of our active burrows, N01, with the backdrop of Mauna Kea. Here's a display of all the 5 burrows that we considered active. At least one time, there was a capture of a Banram Storm Petrel using the burrow. Now, in 2020, again, we monitored 9 burrows. we recorded continuously about 211 days of video and camera footage. And the poor employee that we had to look over almost 800,000 pictures for that year, in addition to reviewing almost 3,000 videos. But we were able to do that and collect really valuable information about the behavior of the band run storm petrel. And one thing I want to point out with these active burrows, pretty much they're all on a Pahoehoe flow. We have not discovered any active burrows in the flows. They've primarily been Pahoehoe. Now, one specific burrow I want to identify is N05. I want you to highlight sort of that red highlight that I put overlaying one of our burrows. This is a broken lava tube. And the reason I highlighted this burrow, which I'll be talking in the next picture, we got quite a bit of information from this burrow. So history about the burrow. In 2018, Makalani identified it as a potential burrow in September. 2019, we weren't able to access this area until August. That's when we deployed a camera. During this time, not until October, the camera detected an adult. And then in November of that year, we actually got footage of a fledgling. In the second slide that I showed you guys with the fledgling exercising its wings, this came from this burrow. Now, this is really exciting news. Last year, the first time we detected an adult at this burrow was May 28, 2020 at 2:08 in the morning. And this week before our conference, I ended up retrieving our camera cards. And either just ironically, we detected an adult in that burrow pretty much the same date, but in the future, in 2021. So May 28, 2021 at 1:58 in the morning, we captured an adult exiting the burrow. Now, this could be coincidental, or it really showing support that these birds have a high frequency of phylopatry, of continuing to come to these burrows. With this new information that I gathered, I definitely need to go back and compare a lot of our first detections to our other burrows to verify just how closely are they arriving around the same time. But it was very exciting to sort of see that it just happened to be the same date, May 28th, within 10 minutes of within the 2 years. So from all the information we've gathered in the last 5 years, we were able to sort of create a Gantt chart. We went into the literature, talked to a lot of special researchers, talked a lot with Andre, as well as other Seabird personnel, and looking at our data with our song meter information as well as our camera data, we created sort of this predicted phenology of what's occurring here at PTA. So pretty much we're estimating that the birds arrive late May. They begin copulating late June, and then they start laying their eggs around the late days of July. And then hatching could be occurring mid-September, and then fledgling could start from late September all the way through November. In 2019, one of our Seabird leaders was able to publish our findings. So if you guys are interested of wanting to know more about the research we did with song meters and the call rates, I recommend you guys take a look at Nikki Galasse's 2019 paper that was published in Marine Ornithology. Now, last year, I really wanted to understand and look at the data of how these birds are behaving outside or inside of the burrow cavity. So last year, again, we only had 2 active burrows. That's N01 and N05, which are highlighted in red. And the way I kind of quantified their behavior, I broke down their behavior in 4 categories. I wanted to look at per event, where the bird either was inside the burrow cavity or if it was outside the burrow cavity. But also I wanted to find out how many times did the bird enter the burrow or exited the burrow. Now, entrance and exiting, I quantified that by the bird either flying into or out of the burrow or walking into or out of the burrow. So with N01, we had quite a bit of information. For the most part, the bird mostly stuck around inside the cavity, but in a few occasions, we did have events where the bird came out, as well as the departure and arrival to the burrow. It was about 50%. Now, again, one of the reasons I keep bringing up N05 is because this was pretty interesting. In N05, we were able to have 21 events where we saw the bird exit, meaning it flew away from the burrow, but we had 0 events of them entering the burrow. We did have the bird sit around inside the burrow and then went back in. So what does this mean? Well, one thing that we're thinking is either A, it has another entry point. So that's something that I really want to focus on this year with Makalani, as well as maybe setting up multiple game cameras around different openings. But 2, talking to other researchers, there's a possibility that these birds might be flying too quickly. I know that some people have told me that some of the game cameras aren't able to catch this event happen. But again, you know, I'll be looking at that more this year to find out if that is the situation. Now, I'll be talking about predator control. Now, this is something that all of us have spoken throughout the presentations, how important reproductive success for these birds are based on our predator control efforts. This picture here was taken back in 2017. In one of our burrows, N02, we were able to capture a feral cat going inside the burrow, removing what appears to be an adult and consuming it. We found parts of its carcass outside of the burrow. Now, unfortunately, ever since this event was captured, N02 has never had any visitation of a BSTP, or Makalani has ever, after 2017, pointed or shown interest to it. So that kind of helped us understand too that Maka was able to sort of differentiate after several years that even though this burrow was occupied before, it wasn't given enough scent to really make him point or show interest of this area. So how do we control for our primary predators, which are feral cats and rodents? We use live traps to capture cats, and we use 2 lethal traps to control rodents. We use A24s as well as snap traps that are placed inside bait stations. On this map, it shows you the breakdown of our deployment of our live traps. One thing I want to point out, in 2020, the Army went through informal consultation on getting approval for us to begin trapping year-round. So U.S. Fish and Wildlife approved our methods. So this is was a big encouragement for us helping the population, where we're able to, for the first time, trap year-round, meaning we're trapping 7 days a week. We're covering about 400 acres of area. Again, we laid down and deployed 49 live traps. Each trap is 200 meters apart. It's baited with sardines. And once a month, my team and I go out there, replace the bait, and also make sure that all the traps are functioning. Now, many of you have stated throughout the presentations, live trapping takes tons of time, money, and effort. I am a CSU, a Colorado State employee, and one of our requirements is to follow the IU Cook recommendations. When dealing with live trapping, we have to check the trap every 24 hours. So before beginning last year's operation, I started reaching out, talking to a lot of people about, is there some other technology to help us become more efficient trappers? And we did find a company, Pika Product Development, which is a company on the East Coast. They developed this product called Skyhawk, which is a small device that works using cellular technology. As long as you have AT&T or Verizon connection, it's able to relay information back to the user by two ways. One, if this device senses vibration, it sends you either an email or a text that is vibrating, or if you connect it with a magnet that they sell, once the magnet is separated, it does give you a differentiation between vibration and the separation of the magnet. By tying this magnet along the door of the live trap, we're able to identify if the trap had been set off. So how well did it work? Well, we started doing a pilot study. We looked at a comparison close to a month of each other. For the first month, we just used our day-to-day normal operations. For 6 weeks, we monitored 40 live traps. Due to our work schedule and the IU Cook restrictions, we're only able to trap for 3 nights consecutively, and then we closed the trap. So we had a total of 17 trap nights, and we used 134 personnel hours. After that ended, we did the same study for 5 weeks using the same traps, but we added the Skyhawk units. This allowed us to trap for 7 consecutive nights. We almost doubled our trapping nights, and we lowered our personnel hours almost 77%. So the breakdown based on costs, we pretty much saved about $4,000 a month, mostly on labor, by using the Skyhawks technology. So we're very happy with the results. These Skyhawks have been very functional. We used them now for a year, and we haven't had really a lot of malfunctions. They use AAA batteries, so we're able to swap them when the batteries go low. So our results, again, in 2018 and 2019, we were restricted on predator trapping. So we were only able to trap during the pre-arrival, so that's 3 months. We captured 3 cats, 1 black rat. And then in 2020, last year, for the first year where we trapped year round, we captured 5 cats, 1 black rat. And just this year, in the 6 months, we captured 4 cats and 1 black rat. And again, this is using live traps. So we definitely have removed quite a bit of feral cats from the colony. Now I'll be transitioning over to A24s. Again, this last year was the first time we're able to grid out and use A24s at our site. We spaced out the A24s 50 meters apart, and we ended up identifying 5 treatment sites at calling where we put down A24s. And among these areas here, of the 5 units, they do consist of the 5 active burrows and 3 potential burrows. So we deployed a total of 106 A24s. We're using the A24 chocolate lure, and every 3 months we go out there, replace the bait and the CO2. And like Andre and a lot of you have pointed out, our concerns, we know there are barn owls out there. So to prevent any habitation to owls coming and consuming these carcasses, every 2 weeks when we're maintaining A24, or when we're going out there maintaining the cameras, we physically collect any carcass found inside the A24s. So here's a quick sort of diagram to give you an explanation of where we set everything up. Again, our treatment sites are 150 by 150. Each A24 triangle is spaced 50 meters, and the burrow is dead in the center of all this trapping effort. In addition, because of concerns with A24s, we're only able to use snap traps inside bait stations to get up close to 25 meters from the burrow. One thing I want to point out is we modified our A24s. One thing is the 106 A24s we use, we adapted in using the Good Nature stands. Again, Good Nature sells these stands. But one thing that I did modify the traps, if you see here, this orange sort of cap, this orange cap is what comes with each A24. It's pretty much a tree bracket. It does have holes in it. So I pretty much just zip tie this orange tree bracket on top of the device. Now, one thing is, this area is of concern for non-target take. We do have Oahu in this area. So the Hawaiian thrush, we do have concerns in case they are interested into the trap and possibly having a take on it. So I wanted to decrease as much as I could the non-target take, but I also wanted to evaluate with this new adaptation, will I still be able to get high rates of rodent removal? And I'm happy to say we did have good success. Our totals in 2020, we were able to eliminate, or to collect, I should say, 34 black rats and 48 mice. Now, there could be obviously more rodents that were removed, but because we're collecting the carcasses every 2 weeks, there could have been some scavenging occurring. Now, one thing is, we also were concerned again, can these A24s have an impact to non-target? So what we ended up doing is we placed 7 cameras on these A24s to document any non-target take. Last year we had 0 non-target take. We did not see any thrush around these cameras, or barn owls sitting around scavenging the rat carcasses. Now, we did detect, as you can see on the picture below, 2 feral cats. We captured them close to the camera, as well as them removing the carcasses. But we also captured carcasses with the camera and additional rodents crawling all over the A24. So we know that they're still functioning and removing multiple rodents. But we also did capture game birds. They never interacted with the camera, but they were walking around it. The main game bird that we saw in that area was chukars. But again, we never saw any interaction pictures with these game birds. We had chukars as well as Urkel franklins out there, and also one Pacific golden plover. Now, tracking tunnels. I know that one of the things that we're trying to do here is how efficient are we when it comes to predator control. So we ended up deploying 152 tracking tunnels. We used pretty much the same method a lot of you guys are familiar with, ink, pad, and we end up using the same A24 lure. These tracking tunnels were inside our 5 rodent control treatment sites, as well as 2 control sites here. They were spaced 25 meters apart. And we ended up doing this every 3 months. Unfortunately, the data is pretty inconclusive for this presentation. I didn't really want to confuse a lot of people yet as far as what was occurring, so I left it out. But I will be looking at the data and trying to come up with an explanation of what our rat activity results are showing. One pattern that we do know that some of these tracking tunnels, or sorry, some of these rodent treatment sites, there's a decrease of black rats, and then there's an increase of mice. Now, I've talked to a lot of researchers, and we've seen this in the past. You take away the black rats, the mice population can increase. Again, just success ahead. Just want to do a quick recap. In the last close to 6 years, we've been able to successfully document 5 active burrows with our cameras. Within this detection, we have identified and detected 3 fledgling events. And last year, it was the first time we actually detected 2 adult Vanderum storm petrels outside of burrow. I do have a video of that. If we have time, I can show it to you guys afterwards. Now, one thing I want to highlight, between 2015 and 2017, we had very limited predator control, and we did see quite a bit of carcasses. As Makalani walked along the colony, he was able to identify and point when he did come across feathers or wings of BSTP. Now in 2018, when we began sort of the pre-arrival trapping, and then we increased our predator control, we have not found a single BSTP carcass, either by us walking along the colony site or Makalani. So again, we believe the increase of removing rodents and cats could be giving us those results with a decrease of BSTP carcasses. So that ends my presentation. Are there any questions?
Yeah, my question may be more, I'm assuming after we have your presentation that we'll maybe have a little bit more open discussion, but it's interesting listening to the variety of presentations. There's a huge variety of approaches being used for predator removal, for monitoring burrows, for even calculating nesting success or fledging success. And maybe, do you mind just speaking to like how often you talk with other folks who are managing seabird colonies on the same island even, and you know, kind of work to maybe standardize things? I realize people are completely differently resourced, right? Your capacity to monitor, to go through, you know, tens of thousands of camera photos is different. But yeah, can you maybe just speak to that and what kind of challenges you might face if we were to say, you know, standardize the kinds of things we wanted to see on ESRC or something like that as far as the reporting metrics? What kind of challenges would that bring for you? So yeah, I'll just open that up for you to speak to.
Great. No, thanks for asking that question, Melissa. Yeah, as far as collaboration, pretty much I've been working at PTA for 10 years. And again, starting back in 2008, is when we really used song meters, and we started picking up a lot of hot pay calls. But in TA21, in this colony site, is when we started actually hearing more Vanderum storm petrel calls versus hot pay calls. So I began reaching out. I've been conversing with Andre for, you know, pretty much almost 10 years. So I definitely talk a lot with Andre as far as what they're doing in Kauai. And, you know, with Kathleen Nisahan at Volcano National Park, when she was working there, I definitely work with her, with Alex, with Ian Cole. I know my supervisor, Lena Schnell, has reached out to Jay. So we definitely have asked a lot of feedback. And I know that just my style of management, I'm very detailed. And because we have access to these burrows, unlike some other places where, you know, they use helicopter, I definitely maximize sort of the footage and the videos as much as I can. My background is more on small mammal control. And as far as, you know, the placement of these, you know, that could explain why I'm doing things a little bit more different. It's very grid-like, but I'm also really trying to incorporate a matrix. How do I manage or measure my success? And so I do work with a lot of partners where we ask questions. challenges definitely is besides Makalani helping us find these burrows, we've had no success. Years ago, pre my time, we tried the Ferono radar. That was not successful. This year, as well as last year, I was not able to start my song meter collection. So definitely hearing a lot of information from a lot of researchers. I definitely want to try to start that again, seeing could we use song meter like Andre and a lot of the other researchers are using to correlate call rates based on that success. You know, at the same time, I know, again, our biggest challenge is the BSTP is just so cryptic. You know, I really thought the minute we were able to identify that we have an activity with our cameras, we should be able to get more information year to year about their fledgling success. And unfortunately, we've really struggled with that. Is it because of the cameras not picking them up, or the fact that these lava tubes might be so complex and we just cannot find the outlets where they're exiting? So again, I think more the unknown is sort of our challenge. But again, I feel with the time that I have to really look through the data of the footage, I'm able to sort of capture a little bit more information. Like I mentioned, knowing that in Burrow NO5, I could only get exits, right? I didn't have a single entry. So that really helped me understand, okay, something's happening with that. So I do feel, again, trying to learn from what we're doing is helping quite a bit. If there are no questions, I definitely would like to show you guys some videos. But
I got one question. So relating to, it doesn't seem like these are true burrows. It seems like they're cracks and crevices or small lava tubes. Have you seen any evidence of actual burrowing?
No. Well, I should say one of our cameras did show one petrel sort of scooping out soft soil. And then the way that we are sort of quantifying the description, what an active burrow is, after talking to Andre and reading this paper, we're pretty much using a lot of sort of their identifier marks of what's considered an active burrow, meaning you have numerous photographs of adults coming in and out. And obviously, if we do find a chick exiting that burrow, we do classify that as active. One of the ones that originally we considered active, looking at the data closely, I really think it was a prospect. We only had about 4 events 1 year, and about 3 others the next, and then 0 events in the next 2 years. So I'm definitely, as I find more time to really dive into the footage, I'm able to sort of categorize that a little bit better.
Yeah, so speaking of that footage and that evidence of phylopatry, you know, the 2 a.m. time frame seems very different than the other seabirds that we've been talking about. Does it seem like they're coming back at 2 a.m. or that's just when something showed up on camera?
You know, yeah, you know, at least all I can say is, again, it was either just coincidental, but it just happened that the camera captured that exit that close of the date and the time. And again, this is just something that just caught my attention. You know, I gathered the data today, this past week, and I was like, wow, that's the same data as last year. So again, you know, definitely I need to go back and look at past year's data at the different burrow sites and see how close are they where we're first detecting an adult. And just like you said, you know, obviously they could be coming in earlier, but maybe our cameras didn't detect it. But, you know, it's something new that I definitely want to continue looking at.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought it up because if I'm remembering correctly, in the adaptive management for the radar program on Kauai, they refine the times to be more close to sunrise and sunset. And if I think they're starting to do that in Maui now, I don't know if they're following the same protocols or if I'm even not remembering it correctly, but this might be good evidence for us to make sure we're doing radar all night, not just in the sunrise sunset hours.
Yeah, and you know, Kavika, I know if you get the chance, you know, you've been asking a lot of good questions. The publish that we did in 2019, you know, definitely does discuss sort of the audio, the rate calls, and Nikki displayed quite a bit of graphs that showed, again, sunrise, where highest activity was about 2 hours post sunrise, and then 2 hours pre-sunset, right? So definitely they're following a lot of the same behaviors that we're noticing at the different islands. But in addition to this, you know, you asked about flight patterns. I didn't put it on this presentation, but definitely, you know, another time I can show you graphics that we did do night vision recordings, and we took bearings of where we kept seeing these birds flying. Now, one thing I want to note that with the Hape, the Hawaiian petrel, our audio song meter analysis, again, have detected the Hape flying, but we've never discovered a burrow on PTA. But based on the comparison of call rates, it does appear that the Hape are just flying right through PTA and heading towards Alex's sort of area down towards Mauna Loa.
Okay, thank you very much. It was very helpful.
All right. So this is one of our videos that we were to capture a panorama storm petrel entering into a burrow. It pretty much took 2 seconds for the bird to land and go right in. So yeah, so that was pretty cool. It's the first time we really captured the full sort of view of the bird coming in and landing and then crawling right into the burrow. And this burrow is N01. And N01 for the past 5 years, there's only been 1 year that we did not get activity in there. For this burrow, for one time in 2018, we actually were able to capture a fledgling exercising its wings and actually flying off into the distance. So that was really successful. This next video here, like I mentioned, last year was the first time we ever saw 2 adults outside of a burrow. And if, again, I'm not a panorama storm petrel specialist. If any of you have any insight of what exactly these 2 birds are doing, they're copulating, are they, you know, showing sort of territorial? I'd love to hear your opinion. And that interaction took about 13 seconds. So yeah, if you guys have any thoughts, I'd love to hear what you guys think that behavior is.
Kind of looks like territoriality to me. Hard to say with just 13 seconds and what they're doing. But I had another question about your the batteries that you're using in your camera.
Yes, Jay.
We were using rechargeable batteries in our Reconyx cameras, and we switched to the lithium batteries, and we get much better, quicker response. Like the rechargeables, even when they're fully charged, didn't respond as quickly.
Yeah, we do use only lithium batteries. With us, definitely in last year, I ended up switching to time lapse. In previous years, everything was based on motion sensor. And last year, I really wanted to try to identify a different technique that maybe could increase a better understanding of their behavior. So by adding that time lapse is really, I think, one of the biggest reasons I was able to really share more information about what the bandworm storm petrel is doing outside or inside of the burrow. Ultimately, one of the things I really want to try to, write and really put out to, to the other biologists is, how often are they hanging outside the burrow? I feel that if I'm able to calculate, time, maybe we could even look at, are these birds outside long enough where a predator could consume them a lot quicker? Or how often are they really just sticking inside the burrow? Are they? So there's a lot of information that I think these cameras can help me sort of extrapolate. But again, I am at the mercy of the speed of the camera. So that's something that I'm still working out. All right. Well, again, I want to thank everybody for sticking around, and I really appreciate your guys' talks and opportunity to participate in this conference.
Thanks everybody for listening to all the presentations. They were really good. We will try to get copies of them as PDFs if possible, and the YouTube video will remain on our website if anybody wants to rewatch any of the presentations. I think that's it. Koa, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'd like to kind of follow up on Melissa's raising of the issue of consistency in how we're doing our monitoring. I think the predator control is very much more site-based, and you have to be adaptive to the conditions of your habitat. But I think if possible, we're trying to follow, and we do follow the same protocols as the Oahe Wind guys are following, and what Andre and the Pulama Lanai guys are doing. And that involves having your cameras out on the burrows at the beginning of the season and then monitoring them. We have every 2 weeks we go up and collect a card, and that gives us a really better picture of what the activity levels at each of the burrows is. And it also allows us to identify if there are predators frequenting any one or other of the areas. But we still do toothpicks to an extent because we don't have enough cameras to be able to do all of our burrows in Nakula and Kahiki Nui. We did get enough cameras this year to do all of the artificial burrows that have activity at Makemakaole. And I really think that it's increased our ability to be more accurate. And it really seems like all of the sites that are doing that have higher reproductive success reported than the sites that are using the toothpick method. So I think that's something to look at carefully to see what's the most effective way. And I would like to see all of us using a consistent method.
So Jay, you say you're putting out your game cameras early, but what's early? Are you putting them out in February?
In Nakula and Kahiki Nui, we put them out in February because the birds come back in February. So at the beginning, actually the end of January or beginning of February, we start. In Makemakaole, they come back about a month later. So we're a month behind there.
And you leave these game cameras out through fledging?
Yes.
It's a long time.
It's a long time. And we have a lot of fun going through cards. The more cameras we get, the more time you spend reading cards and filling up data files.
One of guys have ultra small thing.
Well, interesting. Yeah, I guess we maybe could do that. So that does sound like a lot of work. Right now we have this in Mauna Loa, the cameras that text photos, which is really nice. You don't have to go collect it. But it's on a loop cycle. So after the card fills up, it just starts erasing and covering up again. So at this point, we're not really recording. It was just kind of like for interest, like, oh, there's a cool photo of a bird, or we might see a predator or something, but we're not like actually using that as we're not recording, arrivals and all that information.
Yeah, one thing I definitely would like to plug, if there's any way you guys could get a dog detector to assist you guys, I really recommend that. At PTA, we really wouldn't have broken ground until, we were able to work with Makalani. So, I'm looking forward this year to work with, Alex and Ian and Teresa for that, because I do feel, that's been pretty much the game changer for us on finding these BSTP burrows.
Hey.
Okay, great. Kate had to step away, but if there's nothing else, I guess we'll wrap up the meeting. So thank you everybody for your time. Greatly appreciated. It was a great workshop and a lot of great information was shared. But yeah, thank you.
Sorry, my apologies. I know we all have other things to do and I don't want to linger on too long, but is there just a little bit of time to have a broader discussion about what it might look like if we were to standardize reporting metrics or predator control approaches or that kind of thing? My understanding was that was a part of what the intent was of this time.
Oh yeah, of course. Sorry, I didn't hear anybody talking. So please, yeah, we have until 3:30 or later. So yeah, please begin the conversation.
So yeah, I know that there was some discussion amongst the managers who are here presenting, but I'm wondering if we can hear from a broader group as well as from Loyal or Kavika or others in regards to how we might go about that process and think about what kind of standards we might want to have in those areas for both predator control and for response metrics, as far as like what kind of a resource response are we getting for increases in nesting success, fledging success, that kind of stuff.
One thing I kind of wanted to add is I know when I've worked with biologists in Oahu, when they look at, for example, in Schofield or other Army areas, when they're protecting Pichardia, for example, when they lay out their A24 grids, they were able to connect the health of Pichardia, meaning there's a certain rat activity level that Pichardia can still successfully reproduce. And I think their sort of baseline was 10% of rat activity level. So that's something that I'm trying to incorporate with our Banram Snork Petrel information. But like I said, I didn't have enough time to really go into the challenges. The tracking tunnel data for me, I was really hoping to show a difference between our control sites and our treatment sites. And unfortunately, a lot of the control sites hardly had rat activity, which I was shocked. So, it's a bummer because, I really laid down a good experimental design thinking, I could be able to get those presented. But that's something we're trying to incorporate both on the animal side, but on the plant side at PTA of trying to hit, is there a threshold, at least with rodents, where rat activity could be looked at as far as a component to reproductive success.
This is Rachel. We had a predator hui meeting a couple years ago where we did talk through a lot of things, and the fact that we all had other jobs meant that we unfortunately did not do like a full write-up because no one actually volunteered to do that. Also, it could be a good thing for a grad student, but there were some things that we did talk about, which were, if you know that your resource is spread across the landscape, even if you're only monitoring certain burrows, the recommendation would be to not just cluster your predator control around those burrows. We've actually reduced the number of cat traps and increased the scope of where they're covering and have caught more cats and are seeing better success. So that would be my personal recommendation. I would not focus too much about where the burrows you know about, but to use those as a metric to influence the landscape that you're trying to have an effect across. And then, like Rogelio just noted, there is a challenge with what do you monitor? You can monitor how many things you've caught, you can monitor what the predator populations are doing, and you can monitor the resource you're trying to protect. And across these islands, what's evident today is that there are varying levels of ability to do that. For instance, we can monitor our resource, but we're using Hawaiian petrels as a kind of a metric for having a positive influence on rare plants and native tree snails that I didn't even talk about, but like rats eat a ton of those. And so we are hoping that we're having a good influence on those because we can't monitor them as easily. And so we are choosing to trap and monitor Hawaiian petrels, but we're not doing a ton of monitoring of the predator populations themselves because we don't have the resources for it right now. And I will just say that it is very, like, success is very, it's sort of very resource based. Like, I would just caution that if you're catching a lot of animals, you might be being successful in catching animals, but you might not be successful enough to be having a positive impact on your resource. And so if you're not able to monitor your resource, that could be challenging. Like saying we put out 10 traps, we're catching a mongoose and every time we go, but we're still getting whatever we're monitoring eaten, the trapping isn't working. That's not, the trapping is working fine, you're just not trapping enough to have an impact on the predator population that's in that area because they're still finding the resource that they want to eat. So there's just, predator control is challenging, and it requires sort of, shifting your thinking from being the Seabird monitoring side of things to thinking very much about the behavior and movement of the predators.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. I think that's something that's come up in ESRC a lot, is that at a baseline, we want to not just be told how many mongoose you removed or how many cats you removed, because that, at the end of the day, we're not in the cat removal and mongoose removal business, even though that's what it sure feels like, the business that we've gone into. We're really interested in increasing the success of the species that we're managing. And so if those numbers aren't being reported and reported in a way that's comparable among sites, we're missing a key component that can help us do better in future years.
Yeah, I mean, relative, like within an island or within sites, your relative capture rate may be informative. It may be informative about how your traps are being set, or your, relative densities in different areas and maybe where you need to focus more. But it is hard. I wouldn't use it as a, like, we've caught 50 cats versus we've caught 100 cats. And so across different islands. And so, one's better doing better at protecting than the other because you don't know the starting population, or again, what that means for the success of the species you're protecting.
So this is Loyal. This is a good conversation, and I think that the main focus obviously needs to be on what it is we're really trying to do, which is increase the production of these animals by reducing the predation. You kind of think about how we've evolved over the last 16 months on COVID metrics and what we're measuring. It does help remind us that there are many things that we would want to look at as to whether individual strategies are working. Like how many predators are you catching with how many traps? That's all important stuff, and it all may relate back, if you think in the COVID terms, as to how many people are wearing masks, how many people are getting vaccinated, all this kind of stuff. The bottom line may end up being, in COVID, is how many people die, or that's a pretty hard, easy to measure metric compared to some things that are a little bit more difficult maybe. But we kind of have to think about the fact there's a lot of moving parts on all these projects, depending upon what exactly your threat is, what your topography is, and everything else. So there may be multiple small, or not small, that's a poor choice of words. There may be certain activities that we do need to track some of the metrics on to see whether or not our strategies are working, because you may have a different strategy in different areas. But I think ultimately when I'm on the ESRC and I'm thinking of what things are being effective, I'm really tying it back to what is the differential between an area that's receiving a treatment versus if it's not receiving that treatment. If that treatment is usually predator control for what we've been talking about here, I want to make sure that there's a really clear set of metrics that shows what the value of doing that predator control is and how many potential new birds, in this case, that it's producing. So regardless of all the smaller or different kinds of metrics you may use to track how your program is doing certain things, ultimately it has to come back to some sort of big metric that's going to be useful for management and regulatory purposes. If I'm looking at it from an ESRC perspective, is it accomplishing what needs to be accomplished under the regulations, the HCP, the management strategy that DOFAW or a private landowner may have for managing their land. So it comes back to that bigger, what's the impact to the species on the ground? What kind of effect is it having? And can that effect then in turn result in a stable or increasing population of that species? So those are the kind of the big things. And there may be multiple ways to get there, but there has to be a clear logic path, a clear link, and preferably some sort of good validating set of research that solidifies that link between what you're doing and what kind of action you're seeing, and in turn a production or increase in the population for these management actions. That may not help you, but there may be more than one set of ways to get there, but the bottom line is you've got to tie into that metric that we want to see from a management or regulatory perspective.
Melissa, I guess this question would be for you. I believe, right, you've worked a lot with grad students with occupancy with barn owls. That's one thing that I'm drawing blanks on, and I'm really trying to see, can I incorporate some type of design of occupancy using song meters for the Bannerem storm petrel calls? Have any of you sort of, outside of call rates, applied or attempted to apply occupancy to seabird colonies? I'm trying to understand the rates of that.
Yeah. So we don't work with barn owls. We've worked with Boreal, but
sorry, Boreal, sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. The number of burrows and detections that you have at that site, at least based on the nesting, like if you're looking at nest site selection or something like that. So our lab worked with Nicole on that paper that was published a few years ago from your site, and you have too few to have statistical power for anything too fancy, right? So it's kind of a basic nest site selection that we did. As far as broader occupancy using calls, I'm sure there's people on this call who have done that. Is Andre still on the call? I don't remember if he's done those. Yeah,
Andre has like regression of like areas that they've searched for many, many years of so numbers of burrows and call rate, and I think it's unpublished still, but he says it's a pretty solid regression. And so we were talking about it could be kind of fun because we've sort of covered Lanai. It would be fun to just run it out and see what, if you apply the call rates to the regression, what it comes out with, and if it's anywhere close to kind of something that sounds like what we might be reasonable. But I don't know that they've done anything else more.
There's a lot of potential across the different folks on this meeting, I think, where you're managing all these separate sites, but you've got the same species. And so if you can do kind of a statewide analysis for some of these more difficult to study in the field species like bandrooms, that'd be great.
So I have a thing that I think is really the purview of the ESRC and the agencies. You did a wonderful job creating a mechanism to have a white paper on bat biology, what we know about bats, what bats need to be, what we need to do for HCPs, what we know about their mortality, their distribution, their presence. And I think that the ESRC and the agencies could call together to have a white paper, because I just heard all these talks, and there is such a difference in how things are going about. And that might be a mechanism to standardize that really at the level where, oh, if you're going to do seabird management, here's a white paper, here's what we think, we convened this. It might still be a work in progress, or it gets readdressed every 5 years, but here's the state of the art. This is what you should do. This is what we need to do to help with policy and things like that. And I think the white paper for bats and the way that was handled by the ESRC and the agencies was really something that could be directly done for seabird biology and management.
Melissa, the question you asked about using acoustic monitoring data to try and understand perhaps a relationship to the number of burrows you've got. I don't know if you remember the slide I showed with it had the green circles with blue dots in the middle. And from our 15 monitors, that one, the largest one, is over an area where we don't have any burrows. And where our concentration of burrows is, we have very low calling rates. The Alpine Wildlife Sanctuary has nearly 400 burrows, but there's hardly any calling that goes on over there. So I think there is actually a paper where they tried to look at it. The conservation metrics guys were doing that early on when Matthew was doing his postdoc work. We put out monitors in Uaukani colonies, and we gave them the density of burrows within a couple of meters, within 5 meters, 10 meters. And he's never come up with any correlation of the acoustic data that was taken there and the number of burrows that were there.
I don't think I asked that question today. I think Rogelio may have asked that question. That's certainly a challenge for all of our species and for planning for things like wind farms. On the mainland, I'm told that they often use designated critical habitat to try to avoid areas that'll be a conflict. Well, that's completely meaningless for us because all of the species that are getting knocked out of the sky are things that move around a lot. And if you just don't put it in the critical habitat, it's not going to solve the issue. It's the flyways and stuff for all these different species that are going to have issues. So yeah, and certainly where they're calling is not necessarily where they're at the burrows. It seems like that would be a little bit maladaptive to make a whole lot of noise right where you're burrowing. Here's my chick, here's my chick. So yeah, it makes sense that they might be calling more elsewhere. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's interesting. Although I wasn't the one that asked the question, so whoever asked that question can follow up with Jay.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think I asked that of Andre, because that's one of sort of my mysteries, right? Is we're hearing all this bandworm storm petrel chatter. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, I should be able to find more than 5 active burrows with all that chatter. And the fact that, in almost 6 years, right, there's only been 5. And now, granted, I stopped using song meters just because I don't have enough personnel and time to deploy them and really set a good design. But that's one main question I think Andre kind of talked about, that they're learning that, you could use that call rate and sort of connect that to breeders and non-breeders. But yeah, that's one big challenge I have is trying to incorporate, song meter data into, helping me maybe identify where I should be taking Makalani to search more. One thing I want to add, at least, again, learning from the cameras, I definitely am going to be doing this year is searching with Makalani more during the incubation period, just because I think that's where the largest scent of the Banram storm petrel could be happening. So yeah, so that's just one thing, is trying to learn from what we have. But yeah, the non-callers are definitely a challenge.
I just wanted to briefly respond to Fern's suggestion of a white paper. I think that's a great suggestion. Loyal maybe can speak to what it took to pull that together, because I know that was a very heavy lift. I know I personally don't have capacity. My lab's already working on something in a similar vein for water birds and for ungulates. So that's about as much as I can handle for 1 year, I think. But Loyal, do you want to just speak to the kind of lift that it was, and maybe what might make sense on this, as far as would it make the most sense to have the different leads on the Seabird recovery programs, put something like that together, or what might be a potential pathway? This is a good suggestion.
Well, Acoustics was actually the first iteration of the BAT guidance came out via Acoustics in 2015, and for the last 2 years we've been trying to revise that. It's still after being rewritten at least twice in the revised form, and it's still not able to get to the point where it is at the point where folks are willing to consider approving the revisions. So it depends also what your purpose is. If your purpose is to kind of help you with, say, the habitat conservation plans and what sort of monitoring and aspects of the regulatory portion of this is, it ends up getting a lot more scrutiny, if you will, as far as what kind of restrictions it might put on potential HCPs than if it's a more of an academic document, if you will, on ways to make sure that you're sharing data or kind of summarizing data or something along that lines. So it really kind of depends on what you want as your real purpose on that. It's not a bad idea to kind of look at what kind of a strategy would be good for, seabirds in general. There's a seabird working group, HUI, that might be good at trying to do that from a recovery perspective, for example, rather than ESRC. If it's a concern about how various habitat conservation plans, regardless of where that take might be coming from, then the ESRC would probably be a good place for that. It would end up being more oriented on how you determine what actions would be good to take, what sort of documentation you need to show that you've seen a compensation for take, and how to do management, monitoring and reporting, that sort of stuff. So I think it's always a good idea to have stuff, in my mind, standardized, at least as far as the structure of how you're doing things. So I think that the BAT guidance was a game changer when Acoustics and company put that together. It was very good, and it was very important to trying to move forward on bats. So doing something along this lines for seabirds would not be bad, but you might end up having one or two different focuses, one on recovery and one on the HCPs, if you think there's enough of take out there to warrant it for the HCPs. I mean, clearly that would be the case for Kauai, but for the other islands, somebody else would have to make that decision. But Acoustics actually did the write-up on the first one, and so she would know how much that takes, but the revision to that has been very time-consuming. Hundreds of hours, if not thousands.
Yeah, it is a lot of work, but I think it's a really good idea, and I think it's a great idea there is a Seabird hui, and there is a 5-year action plan for the 3 listed seabirds that is kind of laying out what needs to be done for the species, and that's a good starting point, I think, of turning it into a white paper. And that was mainly done with a lot of the people on the call today or in the workshop today. So, maybe developing that more like a white paper could be something that the Seabird hui could work together on. And I know maybe Jay, or not sure who else on the call were authors of that, but that was also a long workload, I guess, to get even to the final product of that 5-year action plan.
On the monitoring side of things, Lindsay and Eric did do a monitoring, like a big Seabird sort of survey of who's collecting what kinds of data. And they did a big workshop. This was pre-COVID, kind of, again, talking through like different taxa and just sort of identifying like which species and taxa are more distributed and more or less represented in the data and the literature and in people's effort. And they had sort of talked, again, this is too bad that Lindsay's not on, so maybe someone could harass her, because they talked, if I'm remembering correctly, about putting together almost sort of like a gold, silver, bronze, like if you wanted to monitor a little bit, here's what would be sort of best practices. If you had more resources and could monitor more, then here's what you would do if you are able to, again, because it all depends on all of our groups, accessibility, the ability to find burrows at all, and all, like, again, all of those things are different depending on the groups, but that might be something to follow up with them on. Lindsay might hate me for sicking people on her to ask her about it, but I'm not sure where that's at. But that had, and I that's what I would suggest, is if there were going to be best practices, to potentially have tiers, with the understanding that not everyone is going to be able to do everything.
Just tell her, Rachel, if that it was Melissa's idea.
Yeah, the Seabird hui spent about 5 years coming up with a 5-year plan, and COVID definitely interrupted our meeting periodically. I think what we're talking about, like in a monitoring or a predator control white paper, is a step beyond exactly where that recovery planning document goes. But I do think it's worth reconvening the remaining members and identifying others who should be in there. We kind of had 2 functions. The meeting Rachel talked about of bringing together everybody who's working on seabirds and sharing all the information was one function. The other was to monitor where are we in terms of achieving what we laid out as the steps toward recovery for each of the species, and then trying to work together to direct resources toward where we were falling behind. So.
Yeah, I think overall, I just want to say seabirds, compared to so many things that we work on across the islands, there can be a lot of hope around seabirds. We know what to do more or less if we control predators and we've got the space for them, they show up. If you attract them there, get them there, and as long as you're protecting them, they can recover. And so that's not the case for all of our species. We don't necessarily have solutions in place that can work for some of the other ones. And so it is really exciting, and I appreciate the work that's represented here that all of you are doing, which, as you've all said, is not easy work. That predator control, it's much easier said than done. The monitoring to see how you're doing is much easier said than done. And so I really appreciate the hard work that everyone on this call continues to do on a daily basis.
One thing I wanted to kind of ask, I might be just late into the game, but it did seem that one of the things that I kept hearing over was a social interaction and seeing that display of the New Zealand audio calls. Is that something that within the last 5 years, different agencies have started doing that technique, or has it been done in the past before?
It has ramped up recently. I think the New Zealand, it was done well before here, but actually it's been used on the East Coast with Atlantic puffins and on the West Coast with common murres. So it's been around for a while, but it's definitely ramped up here as we've tried to have realized that we can't necessarily protect all the birds in situ, and we need to provide other areas. And one of the less work intensive means is to do social attraction. And it worked extremely well for A'o at Makamaku'ole. You know, those birds, we don't have any other A'o known nesting sites, and we definitely brought them in with the social attraction project, decoys and broadcast calls.
Thanks, Jay.
Yeah.
Before we all go, I definitely want to take advantage. I would love to hear your guys' feedback. Is there something specific that you guys felt I was missing, or you would like to know more about the BSTP? Just because I know it's PTA, at least right now, right, is the only known active colony. Hopefully, I'll be able to share that with Alex, and he'll be able to get more information with us. But do you guys feel there's something that I could do to improve, or maybe get information that would be more valuable?
Rogelio, have you tried moving your cameras a little farther away from the burrows so that you get a bigger frame?
Yeah, we tried that, but we definitely noticed we kept getting false triggers. I didn't share it in the presentation, but we definitely have a lot of sheep. It's unfortunate that the colony is outside our ungulate proof fencing. And with the wind, the rain, if there's any grass out there, oh man, I take a million pictures of grass. And also I've noticed these cameras have been triggered by moths. So that's one of the reasons why I definitely got a little closer, because it was just eating up my batteries and SD cards.
Yeah, I understand the problem. It's just, trying to get, the birds are moving so fast, and for the camera to catch them, because we even see it with the uapu. They come in and you'll see the bird come out, but you never saw it go in.
Yeah.
So at PTA, have you done any dog searches within the fenced area?
We have not, Loyal. One is, sorry, I'll take that back. We have, there is a map that there's a sort of a middle area where there's a good pahoehoe flow. Past song meters had detected high rate calls, but for 2 consecutive years, when we took Makalani out there, he never showed any interest. We walked again quite a bit, and we got no hits. So, again, we're very complex. We don't really know, perplexed, why this area is more attracted, or at least we're finding them. But yeah, we've tried to look inside the fence unit at the pahoehoe flow, and we've had no luck.
Thank you. Too bad.
Yeah. One other comment, if you guys can share, I've had a hard time trying to get approval to use a burrow cam. Personally, I think the only way I can really definitively at least interpret success if I can get a shot, right, of the nest itself, how many eggs were laid. So that's one struggle that I'm having. I know U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services have a lot of concerns if a burrow cam could, disturb and have the adults abandon the nest. But if you guys are using some type of endoscope, have you guys had any failures due to that type of video footage?
We are using burrowscopes on, it's covered under our permit, our recovery permit for using burrowscopes, as long as we're not like contacting the bird. We had one that was from a New Zealand company that, I mean, the probe was like that big, it was huge. And second, I think it was Sextant Technologies. And so we've started using one that I can drop a link in the chat. It's from Amazon, it's by Depths Tech. Jay turned us onto it, and then we found one that same company makes that is like $80, and it actually has a longer battery life and like an 8 megapixel camera. And so yeah, it takes video, or it connects via Wi-Fi to your smartphone, or we take iPad minis in the field for our data collection, so that are in like waterproof cases. So we just connect it to that, and then oftentimes we have 2 people out there anyway, or you can do it with one person, which is where you're looking at it, and it has been a game changer. Many of our burrows are also like, you could reach, Andre's arms are like abnormally long, and he can reach all the way in and, take a photo with a flash camera, which if that's the other allowed option, like was the other option. And so that, I think I would argue, is a similar probably level of disturbance. We're only doing it once a month. But even with him reaching in and taking a photo towards the back of the burrow, we couldn't see the back of the burrow. Like there's another turn and it would go back farther. So using the burrowscopes has been a game changer in terms of being able to confirm breeding. And we're also interestingly seeing, that's where I made a note, like we're seeing a fair amount of activity during kind of the breeding season, where it doesn't seem like there's a pair, but we can't find an egg. Like there's no sign of an egg. We don't see it in the burrow. We don't see eggshell. We don't see it outside the burrow. There's a camera on it that's been working the whole time. There's a couple that have we'll see abandoned eggs in burrows, and we'll see a couple pairs that had an egg that it seemed to fail, and then they were digging a ton and they buried it in the burrow, so the egg never came out the entrance. But it's interesting. You see interesting things like that with the scopes.
Good, thanks.
I'll drop the link.
I've been using burrowscope of different types for the last 15 years anyway. And I don't think we've ever disturbed birds to where they abandoned. You're putting it in, and sometimes you will go by the bird even. Lanai was really sweet because the average burrow length we got when I was there was about 2 meters. Whereas trying to use the burrowscopes up on Haleakala, where the birds are nesting in lava cracks and crevices like what you're dealing with, it's all but useless. You can't get it in far enough, and there's too many rocks, and you cannot be consistent at all. You'll get one burrow that you can study and find the contents, and then the next 6 you won't be able to get it in there. So it's again real habitat dependent, and I would suspect your cracks and crevices are going to be really difficult unless your birds are nesting real close to the entrances.
Thanks, Jay. I just wanted to comment. Somebody, I don't know, jokingly said, they're hoping to use a FLIR. We had quite a bit of failure. We tried numerous times using FLIR technology, going out at these colony site, but the lava retained the heat so much that everything was red. I could not distinguish, pretty much any movement. I did see a quick blurb, but I could not distinguish it. So I know that's another big challenge. We tried the FLIR, but the lava flows just retain the heat too much.
Yeah, Lindsay she has had good success of using drone mounted FLIR to pick up wedge-tail shearwater burrows. The burrow entrances emit heat. She did come over in the middle of last summer, right as the inter-island quarantine was, like, she came over the last day she would have, anyway, quarantine was a thing. And so we went up, and again, we're doing it at first light. Like, so we were hiking up to the colony at like 4:30 in the morning to get there for 30 minutes before sunrise. And obviously our density of uluhe is a lot, there's a lot. And so it did not go super well. You can pick up if you walk around with it, and we have a handheld that we use for other things. So you can pick up entrances of Hawaiian petrel. I'm curious where the band drum storm petrels, it'll, like you noted, it's going to be, you know, we have some of the walls of the canyon that are not normally in light for most of the day. And so they may have time to cool down. And it would be the thing where you'd have to go out and camp, and then you'd probably run the drone out just prior to sunrise and see if, I mean, again, to see what happens. I don't know. We'll see what happens. We have the FLIR, we have people, and we can camp for a night or two. So it's like, you know, make them hike out there. So it's not helicopter time. It's far, but it's possible.
Well, thanks for the link about the endoscope.
Koa, it sounds like maybe the conversation has now run its course.
Sure. All right. Yeah, we're coming up on the hour. So yeah, I guess we'll call the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for your time. There's a lot of great information that was shared that will help inform the ESRC, future information. And again, you can rewatch this entire workshop on the ESRC YouTube channel. So yeah, thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you,
Thanks, Kate.
Afshin, Kate,
Thank
putting
you.
it all together went real well.
Yeah,
Thanks, everybody.
stay safe. Thank you.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Kathleen, at least why don't you show us your face here? We haven't seen you in like a year and a half.
Couple more months.
He's camera shy.
I guess so. Oh, well, that's okay. You all take care. It was nice
Thanks.
hearing everything from you guys.
See you guys soon.
Aloha.